Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I hope you guys can see me okay. Let me know if there's any stuttering or anything like that in regards to the video. The signal here is fantastic. It's like clock speeds are like nearly 200. So hopefully the stuttering and everything else on the video will be straight. I've also hopefully things will go well. I'm not going to go into details, but I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Do I look different to you in some way? Do I seem different? Get a good look, all this stuff. Your humble host is now 48 years old. This is the first day of being 48 years old. And of course, you don't necessarily fall off the cliff. They often say youth is wasted on the young. I kind of get why they say that now. And I have this bad tendency of calling people in their 20s children. But is what it is. I remember what I was at 20. And so I kind of, had that mindset. They probably don't see it that way. But look, thank you for all the birthday wishes that you guys sent. Much appreciated. August 31st, 1977, 6:05 a.m. Taking that first breath of life coming into existence. But 48 years, Jesus. My cousin married a woman with my exact birthday. Exact birthday. And I'm like, how creepy it is that you went looking for somebody who's effectively your cousin or somebody like your cousin. But, I was talking to her yesterday. It was like, Jesus, man, we're nearly half a century old. She's like, yeah, a half a century. So there is that. I remember being in my 20s thinking that, God, man, when you're at 50, you're nearly dead. Well, nearly 50, not nearly dead to my knowledge. I mean, I could drop dead tomorrow, but that could be anybody. But no, thank you for all the birthday wishes, all that good stuff. It's much appreciated. You were born a month early in August. What? What do you mean? I was born a month early in August. No, I'm born August 31st, last day of August. But things are going well. I hope you guys are doing well. Wherever you are, as I always point out under the sound of this voice, I thank you for being here. You could be anywhere, but you just so happen to find yourself here. And I appreciate you for being here. As you can see, I'm in a new spot. Much better internet, much more comfortable in this spot. So shout out to Airbnb for making things right. I'll go with that. But let's get into things that matter. News. Let's get into news. So the SCO summit is taking place. You have all of these leaders who have shown up to this particular summit. All of these leaders. Look how isolated Putin is in this. Ain't that something? Look how isolated Vladimir Putin is. It's amazing how isolated he is, standing there with all of these other world leaders, just completely and entirely isolated. That is what isolation looks like, according to the West. These leaders obviously represent the majority of the world's, people, for one. I mean, China, India, Russia, Iran by itself. China is what, 1.4 million? India is like 1.5 billion people. That's like half of the globe. You add in other world leaders, of course, you're going to get effectively more than half of the globe. You can also point out that this may be, if I am not mistaken, more than half of the globe's economy. And I may be wrong on that, at least like 40% of the globe's economy. But all of these world leaders together, Turkey, hell, even Armenia showed up. Pashinyan even showed up. That is fascinating. I can't wait to talk to Sarah about that. But Xi Jinping, Putin, Modi, and those are the big three that people are paying attention to. And I want to point something else out. It's not just the SCO summit that's taking place. Lula is calling for an emergency meeting of BRICS. Now, this is obvious as to why. The tariffs is the issue. Trump randomly, and by the way, I don't think it's random, by the way. I know people are saying that. And I don't even think it's entirely about Russian oil. I think part of it is about Russian oil because Donald Trump is looking for some leverage over Russia. He can't necessarily find it. He's trying to do everything in his power to do it. And in the process of doing it is effectively alienating all of these countries. The interesting thing about him, though, if you look at who he's targeting, Brazil, India, he tried to target China. Yes, he put tariffs on the entirety of the world, but with China, he had what, like 200% or some insane number, 50% on Brazil, 50% on India. He tried to go after China, but that didn't necessarily work, so he backed off on that, trying to get some kind of trade deal, realized that it was damaging the U.S. economy, so he backed off. But this is BRICS. Went after South Africa. Now, you can say there are other reasons for him doing so. South Africa at the behest of Israel, Brazil because of Bolsonaro. But those are such stupid reasons. Are those stalking horses? Was the real reason BRICS? Donald Trump has mentioned BRICS on more than one occasion in a way that the Democrats haven't. And he's mentioned them in this context of they're trying to attack the U.S. They're trying to subvert the dollar. They're blah, 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 blah. As if people are forced to use the dollar. How weird is that, right? You must buy my product. You must use my currency. Who the F are you? Who are you? And usually when they're arguing this capitalistic stuff, they're arguing is, well, people have free choice. They can choose to do this. They can choose to do that. That's what made capitalism great. What the hell is this? What late stage capitalism coming to fruition? Is that what it is? And is it shocking that you get the world to effectively say we need something else? We need a new model. We need a new vendor. We need to be able to work in coordination with one another because the United States is effectively using the dollar as a weapon and using the sanction power and tariff power as weapons. Trump overplayed his hand. And because you are incompetent and because he is not proficient in understanding the way the world works, and to be honest, he's the US president. Most of the time, they don't really care. Well, that's coming back to bite him in the ass. India, the country that was more friendly to the United States, that many people thought was a stalking horse in BRICS, no less, has now decided my bread is buttered better Russia and China. And mending fences with Russia and China, or at the very least with China, in order to try to, let's say, have a better option as opposed to this neo-colonialism in the way that they interpret it, that the United States is trying to effectively effect on India. We were a colony, no more. We are nearly half the globe. We have 1.5 billion people. We have a burgeoning military. We're sending stuff into space. You will treat us as an equal, or you will not deal with us at all. So India, you have the situation of Modi, Xi Jinping meeting up. I don't believe for a moment this photo op is not intentional. Look at them coming together. Modi's holding Putin's hand, and they walk to Xi Jinping. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy, back at you. You doing okay? I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Oh, we're so happy together. We're so happy together. Get out the way. Get out the way. Look at you. Yes, we're happy together. We're happy together. Modi laughing, shaking hands. Good spirits. At this SCO meeting, this is a side conference between these guys. And of course, there are bilateral talks between Russia and China. There are going to be bilateral talks between Modi and Xi Jinping, and probably trilateral talks between all three. In fact, they will be, have been, because at this point, they're closing today. This, if you are Trump, it's not what you want to see. And what's wild about it, Peter Navarro, you can explain, because it took me a while to understand, why is Navarro acting hysterical? Like, when a world leader or when people in a particular government acts hysterical, you have to wonder why. Why are you being so shrill in this moment? Why are you not more muted in the way that you're explaining this stuff and calmer in the way that you're explaining this stuff? As a rule, unless the person's just always that way, people get shrill and hysterical when something is going wrong, not when something is going right. When I pointed out in the Democratic primaries, in the Democratic election, for example, Kamala Harris, and they started screaming, Donald Trump is going to put people up. He's going to shoot Liz Cheney in my face. He's going to shoot Liz Cheney in the face. It's like, whoa, why are you saying that? You're saying that because she's losing. If she was winning, you wouldn't get that shrill. Well, same thing with Navarro. They realized they effed up. And instead of somehow peeling away India by getting it to kneel before Trump, It was the exact opposite. Modi stopped picking up Trump phone calls. Modi ends up mending fences with China. Modi goes to the SCO, and all of these guys are buddy having a conversation. And that photo out there is meant for the world to see. Putin holding Modi's hand, peacemaker, walking him over to Xi Jinping, China, who he has issues with, as a one happy family. Don't think for a moment that picture was an accident. It was not. And I would imagine the people who got it or who needed to see it saw it. So, yes, you have a situation where the axis of the world, with all of these trade relationships, may shift, especially if India, and keep in mind, it's not just the Indian leadership. You have the situation where people in Shoban hit me up today, by the way, Shoban Saxena, and he was like, dude, this is big. Yeah, it is. The two largest countries may be merging together and may be putting aside many of the differences that they were having. Not because, oh, we're just coming together, but for the exact same reason that BRICS exists in the first place. BRICS exists because of Western hegemony. The way that they use the dollar as a weapon, I would tell you, anytime you have a weapon that is unassailable, there will be means and methods to come to either take that weapon away from you or to come up with countermeasures for that particular weapon. Doesn't matter what that weapon is. Even if that weapon is the dollar, it's not immutable in the way that many of these people think and believe it is. They're coming together specifically because of the way that the U.S. has used the dollar as a weapon. I want to bring on my guest because he can explain this better than I can, and I am grateful that he is with me. Warwick Powell, how you doing, man? You doing okay tonight? This evening?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Jamal?
I am doing great. Better that you're with me. Warwick Powell, he's an adjunct professor at Queensland University, working at the intersection of China, digital technology, supply chains, financial flows, and global policy, economy, and governance. And I think we're seeing all of that today at the SCO. I was showing the audience this picture of Modi and Vladimir Putin walking arm in arm to Xi Jinping, photo op. Obviously, they want that photo op to be seen. And eventually they get to Xi Jinping, in which case they sit there and they talk. Now, all of these guys are going to be having bilateral, trilateral meetings and coming up with new policy. I would make the case to say that this was a massive backfire on the side of the United States in regards to his policy and Donald Trump. But what is the significance of this? The fact that India is supposedly the stalking horse, or the one that wanted to play both sides, has not been taking Donald Trump's phone calls. Modi is pissed off by the 50% tariffs, as he should be. And in this very specific case, is trying to make fences, or mend fences, with China, and all of this is taking place at the SCO. Give me your thoughts on this, the significance.
Look, clearly the images are incredibly explicit in terms of the bonhomie between the leaders, not only these three that you had in the image that you've just shown, but the other leaders involved as well. And I think that speaks to a common purpose. So it's what's shared amongst them that brings them together. And principally what's shared amongst them is a desire to be able to have security in their own countries, to have secure borders with their neighbours, and to be able to pursue economic development in a way that will improve the livelihoods of the people of their countries. So that's the common objectives. The fact that the United States over the course of the last 6 to 7 months has actively sought to provoke and each and every one of these countries to cause economic pain on countries and their businesses and the workers who work in them, in a way that is all about a environment in which the United States gains at the expense of others. So it's a zero-sum proposition.
Absolutely.
It really just reinforces in the minds of these leaders and the institutions and countries that they lead why it is that they must forge ahead with institutions that recognize them for who they are, that respects them in their individuality and in their differences, and are able to come together around a table, a big table, and work towards common objectives. All of this is being done in a way where we also know that amongst some of the participating countries that they have their own bilateral tensions.
Mhm.
And despite all of that, they're able to contextualize the challenges that they might have with one or two of the others and focus on the big picture. And the big picture is ultimately global peace and stability in which their own countries can prosper, with the comfort that they're not going to be um, uh, harassed and harangued and undermined and disrupted by others. And and so what we've seen in the last 24 hours coming from Tianjin is a diametrically opposite picture of what the world can look like compared to the fiasco that we saw a week or so ago with the Europeans turning up in Washington and the carry on that we've seen out of Brussels at, flapping around at everyone else. And we see plenty of that out of Washington too. Capitol Hill is not short of hysteria, and Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal have been running around trying to get their bill up, which is to impose these bone crunching 500% tariffs on countries that dare to trade with Russia. Well, I guess they're going to be imposing tariffs on a lot of countries if they go ahead with it.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, this represents, if not the majority of the world economy, a huge share of the world's economy. And I mean, just India and China alone represents a massive share of the world's economy. And so we'll see if they will be able to pull that off. I'm skeptical that they're going to be able to do that. But let's be clear, though, this is because the dollar has been used as a weapon. I mean, I want to get your take on that. That all of these countries have decided to effectively, we need to pull in our own self-interest. And the United States has been using and leveraging the dollar as a weapon to go after our economies. I mean, when Donald Trump came in, he put sanctions on everybody, or tariffs, quote unquote, on everybody, just out the blue. And I would imagine that many countries look at that and says, okay, this has gone too far.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So this particular group, it was formed 25 years ago, and it was formed principally in the early days to facilitate better coordination amongst member states in relation to security, terrorism, and those sorts of issues.
Mhm.
Over that period of time, this past quarter century, the depth of interactions and the size of the organization has grown to a point where the question of security now encompasses economic collaboration. And we have seen that in a number of really important areas. Obviously, across the Eurasian continent, which is the core of the membership, we have seen over the last 10 years or so a significant expansion of transport corridors, whether it's rail or multimodal transport and other transport infrastructure that enables trade to grow right across that entire Eurasian landmass. And that has contributed to above average global trade and trade growth and above average economic growth for each of the member states involved. We've also seen in more recent years expansion of energy collaboration, and that has involved particularly Russian and Chinese capabilities contributing to the development of energy generating and distribution and storage infrastructure across the region as well. And energy sovereignty is really paramount ultimately to the ability by which countries can pursue their own development ambitions without being exposed to external threats. Thirdly, we've also seen, and this has been emphasised now in remarks that President Xi Jinping as host made, that China will expand its educational contributions and training contributions to SCO members. And that underpins the human capital development layer of economic development that SCO countries have embarked upon. And I think the last thing that's worth noting, and this was coming from remarks that President Putin made, is that increasingly the trade that is the growing trade that is being undertaken across the SCO membership is being settled in national currencies. So rather than using the US dollar as a third party numeraire to assist in the settlement of trades, trade is increasingly being settled in the currencies of the participating countries. So all of this is lending itself to the development of a more secure and more independent network of countries. It's interesting also to note that in his remarks at the Leaders Summit today, President Xi also talked about hastening the creation of an SCO development bank,
Yes.
which would anchor the future financial requirements of SCO development members, and again, importantly, create a safer set of institutions that are no longer exposed to the whims of particularly the United States and its capricious and at times violent policy making. And of course, we've seen in the last week or so, once again, the Europeans talking about confiscating other nations' assets. So, the kind of infrastructure and institutions that are being built and consolidated through groups like the SCO is simply a response to the madness that is taking place around them. I mean, if you were any of these countries and you're looking at all of this, you'd have to be crazy to not recognize all of this madness as a substantial risk and move forward as a result with others who face similar risks to build institutions that protect yourself from the increasingly capricious and desperate policy maneuvers of the old Western transatlantic empire.
Yeah, it's a rational act, basically what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And this is pairs with BRICS Development Bank, and many of these organizations are in BRICS also. I'm curious.
Yeah, the overlaps are really important, right? I mean, and in a sense, you can see the multi-layered network of institutions that have been slowly being built over the course of the last quarter century that are now really starting to mesh together. They all have their own particular areas of focus, both geographically and in terms of their issues. So BRICS was much more of a trading network, whereas the SCO originated, as I said, as an anti-terrorism network and a domestic policing coordination network of countries. But ultimately, as time goes by, the fact that security and economic development and trade and finance are all interrelated as symbiotic elements of sustainable development, these issues do ultimately come together, and they're forming an increasingly tight fabric. One of the ways I like to think about this is to visualize how a single thread is pretty weak. You twine threads or twist them together and they get a bit stronger. But once you start weaving thread together and form a fabric, a woven fabric, that's an incredibly strong network that gets built with very few vulnerabilities and lots of redundancy. And I think that that's what we're starting to see now.
Oh God, you make such a good point. What do you think this conversation between Putin, Modi, and Xi Jinping that they're having? I mean, yeah, they have the overlap in SCO, but when they're hand in hand, walking for the camera, and they, walk to the meeting room and they sit and talk, what do you think that meeting is about? I have an idea of what Modi is thinking, but all of them at this point recognize a shared objective, I would imagine. What do you think they're talking about?
Well, what a great question, and it would be a caption competition. I'm sure there'll be an amazing number of great captions for these images that are coming out. Where you've got leaders hand in hand and really coming together. look, I mean, it'd be impossible to guess because there's clearly a level of joviality amongst them that, in a sense, speaks to a group of people who are actually very comfortable in their own skin to start with. And importantly, despite tensions from time to time, and everyone knows of the challenges that have beset the China-India relationship on and off over the last 5 or 6 decades. Despite all of that, you can see that the leaders are also comfortable in each other's company. And that creates an atmosphere that is conducive to negotiating consensus because there's a willingness to engage in a little bit of give and take because there's a common purpose. And I think, if anything, without being too cheeky, I think it's fair to say that that they were sharing some laughs about the fact that together they are not only witnessing but and experiencing, but in large respects also contributing to the shaping of some very dramatic changes that are happening in the world. And for people who have been in public life with a mission to transform their own countries and to lead them to a better future from their own points of view, this must be seen as something of an important achievement and a milestone.
I want to get to one more question on this, something that you raised. This idea of the difference between, let's say, the Shanghai Cooperation and BRICS, even though many of these countries are overlapping. Security. Do you think the mission of the SCO is going to evolve around the issue of security, especially maybe not necessarily NATO, but one of the things they did talk about was deepening security ties and cooperation in one of the statements, or the statements that they made for the meeting. Is that this kind of recognition of, let's say, a hegemony and chaos, and the chaos that it's set fires to around the globe, that they need to protect their own? Come on, let me be clear. For example, Iran being attacked is a big issue. That was one of the statements that was effectively made, saying it was outrageous that Iran was attacked in this way. They made issues of Gaza as one of their part of their statements. Is the SCO going to turn into something that's more protective in a security sense, where you have larger security operation, kind of like a NATO and the EU in the way that they work in tandem?
I think that there's a couple of parts to this. One is that the SCO, just by the nature of the member states involved, is unlikely to evolve into something that resembles a NATO with specific adversaries as the defining other, right? So NATO came about because a group of states believed that they needed to defend themselves against another very big adversary, which is the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. I don't think that the SCO will evolve in that kind of direction. I think that there'll be something a little bit different. And that difference will come from the fact that the SCO and other related organizations such as BRICS also understands that security necessarily comes with a very particular approach to the question of security, which is an approach that frames security as an indivisible proposition as opposed to a security against somebody. So importantly, it sees security as something that is achieved where one player's security comes because others are secure and vice versa. So you don't gain security at the expense of someone else. But that necessarily also requires a set of institutions that enables effective governance. And the governance are the mechanisms by which differences and complex issues are addressed and resolved. So we have seen again, in Xi Jinping's remarks at the summit, a proposal around this idea of the global governance proposal. So this is the fourth piece in the China proposition, if you will. So China's proposed the Global Civilization Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, the Global Development Initiative, and today it advanced the Global Governance Initiative. And what it's seeking to do is argue that the world and that nations in the world need to create, sustain, and participate in institutions that are geared to all of their common interests, and that these institutions must be inclusive. Right? They're not about keeping others out. They're about creating space at a decision-making table where nations can sit around. They aim to be constructive. Again, it's not about creating rules that sanction others, but it's to find solutions to problems. And ultimately reinforces the idea that that a peaceful coexistence can only happen in an environment that recognizes the sort of fundamental dynamics of a multipolar world. And I don't say multipolar in any particularly strong sort of ideological or political sense, but simply to observe that the world's a big place and that there are many cultures and civilizations that have emerged over hundreds and thousands of years that have their own roots and their own perspectives on the world, their own cosmologies and outlooks, and that these differences are part and parcel of the richness of human life on the one hand. But on the other hand, notwithstanding these differences, there is also the fact that humans have an incredible amount that's common to each other. And one of the things that is common across all civilizations is an aspiration for the creation of the conditions by which the people in those civilizations and societies can flourish. What flourish means in different places and different times will vary, but the idea is to create that space and have the conditions by which people can flourish. And to do that, we also have to have a way of relating to the earth, to the world at large, because we all live on this one planet, right? So the things that people do in their own particular parts of the planet have implications for others. And so when you bring all of that perspective together, we have a very different outlook on what security necessarily means. Now, of course, we have to deal with practical transactional questions, which go straight to specific problems, such as what's happening in Gaza at the moment, for example, and the attacks on Iran. Now, not working towards finding solutions to those issues, but essentially backing one side over another to perpetuate the violence and the tensions is not helping anybody. If you think back only 3 years ago, China worked behind the scenes to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia back together again as two major civilizational forces within that region who've been at loggerheads for some years, and to bring them to a point where they have now normalized their diplomatic relationships. China worked to bring 14 at times squabbling factions of the Palestinian world together to form a concerted position in relation to the future of Palestinian governance. And these are the sorts of things that I think we need to start to see a lot more of, that solving problems doesn't happen by arming one side and insisting that somehow through that process you can bludgeon someone else into doing what you want. At times, of course, we know that violence takes place. The point, though, is to create the conditions where that's not your first move, where kinetic responses is actually what you seek to avoid. And you can do that by being more open to dialogue, by being more focused on finding the common ground, by recognizing that solving complex disputes actually does require some finesse, and it requires time, and it requires some give and take that actually acknowledges that the participants have legitimate concerns and issues, right? Just taking one side over another is never going to solve a problem long run. And that means that you can't just come in from the outside and impose something, right? What you have to do is work with the parties to, in a sense, percolate the solutions up from the bottom. Because only by doing that can the parties who are involved in the dispute ultimately become responsible for the solution and buy into the solution. Otherwise, what do you get? Well, you get talk of having to have so-called security guarantees and troops, in someone's backyard to keep an eye on people. That's not really an answer. Right? The answer is that the disputing parties need to percolate a solution that they can ultimately both buy into. And then you can transcend the conditions of the dispute in the first place.
Warwick, that sounds beautiful.
It's hard work.
And it's very idealistic.
Well, it's hard work too.
And if the people are good faith actors, that sounds fine. In a situation where one side is not a good faith actor, and the issue with Iran is not about nukes. It's not. It's about the very existence of Iran. When Israel went after them, they went after them to make them a failed state. It wasn't, well, we have disagreements with Iran. It was, we want to eliminate them in order to create greater Israel. That's like having a conversation with Hitler and having this thing of, well, we can negotiate with Hitler and we can come to some kind of good terms. There were no good terms with Hitler. Meaning, I understand the Chinese perspective on this, where we can come to agreements, we can come to solutions. War is not the first instance. I agree with all of that. Everything you just said, I agree with. That is not necessarily the way everyone looks at the world. And when you're dealing with a hegemon, for example, the US, when the US is putting billions to overthrow the Syrian government, it's not because, well, we just have a disagreement with the side. It's, we want a side, gone. When they're putting warships at the side of Venezuela, why are they doing that? They're not doing that because we just have disagreements with Maduro. It's, they are sitting on oil reserves, etc., that we want to get our hands on. We don't want China to rush to get their hands on it. So hashtag reasons. I'm saying if you are dealing with honest actors, that point of view makes sense. If you're not dealing with honest actors and people who are looking at the world like a chessboard and figuring out, how do I take a square? That square being the miserable lives of all of these people. When they got rid of Gaddafi, they weren't looking at this as we just have problems and, issues with Gaddafi. It was Gaddafi has a lot of gold. Gaddafi wants to have this Pan-African currency. He needs to die. Even when Gaddafi was trying to make deals, they didn't care about those deals. He needs to die. He needs to go. That is the way they're looking at it. Even in the war in Ukraine, they're not looking for deals. The European Union or the US, the NATO, they're not looking for, let's have an honest agreement. What they're looking for is, we need to A, save face, and B, we need to show how dominance in Russia, because we need to ensure that NATO doesn't necessarily look bad in the war that NATO lost. Like, these are not reasonable, honest actors. I don't know how you get a deal in these situations without some level of leverage at your disposal, whether that's Iran, whether that's Ukraine, whether that's Venezuela. Correct me if I'm wrong, though.
No, you're right. And, you need to have as many tools at your disposal if you are to engage in efforts to, firstly, transcend disputes, or at least get to a point where you can bring parties to the table. In a world where we're dealing with, the presence of hard power, the need to have hard power at your disposal is something that is, a necessary part of being a modern nation state. Having said that, I think the real issue is how those forces are articulated and how they get used. As I mentioned, the aim is to avoid the idea that a kinetic response is always your first response, that there must be many other responses. So somewhere between there being a dispute and war, there must be about 1,000 different ways in which we could possibly at least try to work something out. That's one. It is difficult in an environment where one side, behaves in the ways that you describe, because the temptation in the first instance, of course, is to immediately respond in kind. And the minute you do that, of course, all you've done is affirmed why it is that the world should be governed this way. So part of the challenge always is, if you think that there are some better ways for the world to be governed, is to hold firm and be patient and be strong in your own insistence, I guess, that there are better ways. That doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that there won't be violence. It just means that we won't be the first ones to keep perpetrating violence as the only or the first solutions to the difficulties that people face. I think that there are other things too. Look, religious conflicts in particular, especially when they revolve around ideas of end of days and things, become actually quite difficult, obviously, because they mobilize people in ways that aren't actually materially rational. Right? So it's very, very hard to reason your way through those kinds of disputes. But sometimes, they aren't the only actors within societies that are pursuing these courses, and often you'll find that in many of these societies that the ability of the radicals, if you will ebb and flow. They won't always be the dominant ones who can drive the agenda, and public attitudes do change depending on circumstances, and the aim is to be as patient as you can, with a view to ultimately working your way through. And this can take decades. I mean, these are problems, right? Because you're dealing with circumstances and issues that are also immediate, right? So
Right.
kinetic issues are immediate, and yet we're talking about modifying behaviors that may be decades in the making. So these are forever the challenges that we have, but you don't want to be sliding down or jumping into the kinetic pool with everybody at the first instance just because others are doing it.
Agreed. No, great. That's not my argument. Like I said, I agree with everything that came out of your mouth. An idealistic sense of the world. I totally do. I think this war stuff is insane. I will move to a different issue, tariffs. So appeals court slapped down Donald Trump's tariffs as illegal. And not just illegal, kind of made the point of saying the president doesn't have the powers to do this for taxes and tariffs in the way that Trump has been using it. Now, Trump has been making this argument that there's an emergency, there's something going on that I must get involved in at this moment, and so I'm doing tariffs on the entirety of the world. Now, of course, this argument kind of falls flat when it's, I don't like the fact that Brazil is going after balls and arrows, so I'm going to put tariffs on Brazil, which is like outrageous, right? I don't like the fact that they're buying Russian oil, so I'm going to put tariffs on India. Meaning he's putting tariffs on people and countries for things that have nothing to do with national emergencies and just have something to do with his own pet peeves. This is pretty extreme. I mean, even the tariffs on penguins. I don't know what penguins did to Donald Trump, but the tariffs on penguins also is one of those items that raises eyebrows. Well, the court has effectively slapped it down. Now, they're letting it stay in until October 23rd, where Trump is probably going to go to Supreme Court. But what if the Supreme Court, conservative no less, strikes down Trump's tariffs to all of these countries? I mean, he's been using his powers, 8 months, give or take? What if it goes away and up in smoke?
Look, I think it raises some interesting challenges, both institutionally and also politically. Clearly, at a political level, President Trump has a lot of political capital invested in tariffs as the centerpiece of his economic agenda. And if the means by which he prosecuted that particular agenda is found to have been illegal or unconstitutional, he will need to rethink the approach. And that could mean he will look to use other existing authorities whereby he can impose tariffs for other reasons, but those other authorities under different legislation are more conditional. So, how long the tariffs can be put into place, how large they are, et cetera, is more constrained. The other thing, of course, he could do is ultimately give the green light to proposals such as those being advanced by Senators Graham and Blumenthal to introduce the powers for the president to impose tariffs on countries that are purchasing energy from Russia. Now, that's a lot of countries, by the way, including many nations in the European Union that continue to buy a lot of Russian LNG. And so that opens up a very different set of questions, because quite clearly then the issue of tariffs is no longer an economic policy question, if ever it was, and is now well and truly an instrument of foreign policy. Whether or not the Capitol Hill, the Congress will go that far and hand over all the powers unilaterally to a president is hard to tell, because as I understand it, one of the issues that remains unresolved between Graham Blumenthal and the White House is that the White House wants unilateral authority, whereas the senators don't want that extent of power to be transferred. But that's where I think that could lead to. Institutionally, I think it raises all sorts of other questions too, because it really, I think, puts a spotlight on this question of emergency powers in a general sense and how that is to be interpreted, and whether or not the kinds of issues that President Trump has been arguing for as being national emergencies ultimately warrant the kinds of responses that he's been pursuing in other arenas, whether it's in terms of sending troops into cities or whatever. So there are, I think, quite a lot of issues that this will start to open up, and there's no doubt about the fact that Trump 2.0 has thrown some big rocks into the institutional pond in terms of custom and practice, and he is testing, I think, the extent to which American institutions can hold up in the face of these sorts of what are really political challenges. I think the last thing that will be interesting to watch is should the Supreme Court remain on the side of the appeals court and the lower court prior to that, and come to a view that the tariffs are unconstitutional, how will the political base react? The president has already flagged the idea that the courts are dominated by left-wingers who are opposed to his agenda. I find that quite interesting because most of the justices are actually not left-wingers at all.
Yeah.
But they've been branded, and you can sense that the politics is being readied for a full frontal political attack on the justices of the court on the basis that they're partisan. So how will the base respond to that? The economic problems aren't going away. The problems in the farm sector are still there. We're not seeing a rejuvenation in manufacturing. American households are more indebted today than they've ever been. Inflation is real, contrary to the political claims of the president. And at some point, the promises of America's rejuvenation or the new golden age not coming to reality because people aren't going to experience it. What kind of political reaction is that going to take? Hard to know, because they could actually blame a whole bunch of other people and still rally around the president, whose agenda they firmly believe in, and they will also believe that that agenda is being stymied by the incumbent institutions of the American establishment. So who knows where this all ends up?
Well, also, Trump may have to, or the U.S. government may have to pay back $159 billion.
Yeah.
If indeed the Supreme Court gets rid of this idea that Trump has the ability to do this, that it's going to be disastrous.
It'll be messy to start with. The administration of this has already been a dog's breakfast, right? So, with all the chopping and changing over the last few months about tariff rates, it's caused no end of implementation problems at the coalface. So customs officials are left in a position where their interpretation of the demands are different from one customs officer to another. The requirements are changing left, right, and centre. They're incredibly complex in many cases because we're talking about the application of different kinds of tariffs to different products, questions of how you define which product sits where, how much steel is in a product, how much aluminium is in a product. All of that stuff's created an administrative nightmare for everyone concerned. And then on top of this, should there be a requirement to, in essence, refund the tariffs, Well, they'll need a machinery to be set up to do that, because people will have to apply, they have to prove that they've paid the tariffs, then they're going to be, have the money refunded. It's a hell. Basically, this whole thing was poorly thought through from not only the sort of macro policy point of view, but also from an execution point of view. I mean, this stuff is rookie error stuff. I mean, if anybody understood the machinery of government administration, you wouldn't have done this in this way, because you just know that there's no way that you can convert intention to sensible, smooth implementation reality, when you've literally, in many regards, made up your tariffs along the way.
Last question, and I'm sorry for this. My audience member asked a really good question. If I had to pay increased prices to get something, let's say I bought $1,000 worth of things from Amazon, and the tariffs on those items increased the product by 30%, so about $300. Do you get that money back?
Well, in the United States, which is, of course, the most litigious country on the face of this earth, one could imagine class action court cases being prepared, and that would be a very interesting process, wouldn't it? Because there would be millions, tens of millions of consumers across the country who would have an argument to say, I had to pay more on the basis of an illegal tariff. And if the importer or the retailer is getting refunded, or in fact the importer is, it'll cascade. The importer pays the tariff, and then they pass it on. So everyone that they've passed it on will have a claim, potentially. What for the lawyers? Come out and begin class actions.
Oh, Warwick, that is fascinating. Thank you for this, man. I always appreciate you. I always enjoy these conversations, and I always learn something. And, I argue with my guests all the time. So don't feel any kind of way with me pushing back on it. That point of view of the world is the reason why I want this multipolarity and why I want these countries. I think what Donald Trump did pushing Modi is a great thing for the world, even though it might have been sucked for India at the time. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. Warwick Powell, adjunct professor of Queensland University, a professor of working at the intersection of China, digital technology, supply chains, financial flows, and global political economy and governance. Warwick, you are fantastic, man. Thank you for this.
Pleasure.
All righty. So Warwick gave a damn good explanation of both of those things, the SCO and the tariff thing. I'm fascinated by both. That world vision, I think, is what a lot of people ideally want. This idea that countries, your security is there where my security is there. And it's not just a country thing, right? It's just reality. If you're secure, then I also should be secure. But if my security is at stake because of something that you're doing, obviously your security is also going to be put into question. Israel believes that it can go through and destroy all of these people in Gaza, create hunger and everything else, and that they are somehow going to be safe as they do that. Nonsense. You should not be safe if you are committing a genocide. You should not be safe if you're starving all of these people, killing all of these people, raping people in your prisons and prison camps and everything else. Why should you be safe as you are making other people's lives a living hell? It's that. And so that principle of you are safe because I'm safe, and vice versa. And let's spread that from country to country to country to country. Yeah, there's a logic to that. Maybe I don't need to spend trillions on nukes if we just make a deal to not kill each other. There's that. But of course, in human relations, inevitably somebody comes along and uses that against the others. It's like, well, I mean, or you just have a sociopath that decides, I want to take something that you have. In which case, the process of doubt, trust, a need to arm yourself, a need for weapons, and all of this other stuff I agree with the premise in theory, but this is not in theory issue. You have sociopaths, monsters that are on the globe. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. What's happening is hyperbolic. The murder and the killing of all of these people, the destruction of Syria and the ethnic cleansing of Syria, that's what's hyperbolic. Me pointing it out is not the thing that's hyperbolic. I'm saying, is there any rational conversation you really could have had with the US to stop it from trying to overthrow Syria or Libya, attacking Afghanistan, attacking Iraq? They had all of those meetings trying to come up with some kind of deal in order to stop the attack on Iraq. None of it worked because the entire plan was to attack Iraq. I'm saying when you're dealing with people who have plans, rationale, models that are $1 trillion military and decides how can we use the military to affect our political will across the globe, that don't care about coming to solutions, that only care about enacting force and will. How does your talking work with that? It's that. Like when Hitler's having conversations about Czechoslovakia, he was like, yeah, it'll be the last territory that I want. Thank you for that territory. Now what else can I get? These suckers are willing to give me whatever I want. How can you come to deals with that? If France would have reacted strongly when they first, became clear that they were actually using an air force, increasing their military, maybe. But again, that's an issue of force, leverage, that is trying to deal with somebody who's a sociopath who only understands force. I mean, it's complicated. I don't think, I'm not Pollyannish on this point. I don't believe that you can talk to everybody. There are some people who are monsters. Many countries do care about this issue of leverage and whether that leverage can be used, their own power versus somebody else's power. And if my power is greater, I'm going to enforce my will and push for more. That is the current world. And I accept that you can create a model and create a batch of countries that decide on something different and try to expand into the countries that don't believe in that and believe in force. And you create this argument. I really do think that what is taking place around the globe, especially in the context of either BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, even Belt and Road, is that they are making an argument, a persistent argument. And in the same way that the United States and the Soviet Union were making an argument, where the Soviet Union was like, we're socialists, we care about workers, et cetera, et cetera. And the US will say, we are freedom and justice, we are love and light, we have movie industries, we have Superman, we're free. Look at people in bikinis on the beach, they're having fun. And if you're willing to work, you could also have this great American life, this American dream. And you compare these two systems. Oh my God, look at these big, beautiful grocery stores. There are 50 loaves of bread. There are entire aisles of bread that I can get at this grocery store. Look at all of the things that we can buy and purchase and everything else. You compare the two systems. And in the context of comparing, people err towards one side or the other in regards to what they think is in their best interest. You can make that argument then. I don't think you can make that argument now. And what I mean by that is there's a different argument that is effectively being made now that the Soviet Union has effectively collapsed. And that argument, it runs in parallel to mask is off from the standpoint of the West. We have a rules-based order. We make the rules, you follow the orders. We're a hegemon, and the world should have a hegemon, and we are that hegemon. Now, the vassal states in Europe always bend the knee, turn the tail. It's like Trump's like, bend over. More, and spread them wide. And Europe would do it. And they would spread them as wide as possible. Wider. I just want to see it wider. And Donald Trump would sit there behind his desk as the European leaders, one by one. Not you, Maloney. Never you, Maloney. Never you. Would do that. Everybody else will. Now, the other argument that is effectively being made, and by the way, that argument is made shallow. It's very on the surface. It's not freedom and justice anymore. It's we are the hegemon. We tell you what to do, and if not, we will damage your economies if we have the chance, or we will take you over militarily, as in trying to hit Iran, going after Syria, going after Venezuela. It's shallow at this point. versus we believe the countries are invaluable. We believe in free trade with each other. We don't believe in attacking each other. We don't believe in overthrowing each other's governments. We believe in rule of law. We believe in a constitution. We believe in a multipolar world. There is no hegemon in this context. Those are two very different arguments. And if you're looking at the world, many countries may be afraid to say they accept the secondary argument. But I guarantee you they do. Hence, BRICS, hence, SCO, hence, Belt and Road, hence, more countries avoiding the dollar. I want to go to my guests. We are joined with the man himself, Carl Jha. Carl, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate your visits. And just to give the audience who you are, I think they don't, but still. Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter. I'm sorry, Carl, I have a code, and it's make me just
no worries.
You can follow Carl Jha on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In. You can subscribe and support his podcast at patreon.com, Silk and Steel, where they go through the 5,000 years of Chinese history week by week. Breaking that down, that is a hell of a, God, man, that's a hell of a challenge. I love it. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing good. Well, at least you are having a cold in the tropics. By the way, welcome to Indonesia.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I caught it on the airplane. It never fails, man. It never fails. Every time.
Oh.
You know, during COVID, I had like 2 masks on. I was like, keep your distance away from me, man. Stay away from me. I was like, and I never caught anything. I didn't catch COVID not once.
Nice. Congrats.
Well, yeah, the moment COVID leaves, I get on the airplane and bam, like as soon as you touch down, within 2 or 3 days, you catch COVID.
It's a lot easier to have cold in the tropics than cold places. So
is it?
Yeah. So there's that.
Why?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's. I think it is. It's when the weather is warmer, it just don't feel as bad. at least for me, that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, as well. I've enjoyed it here, though. There is a difference between Malaysia and here.
How are you enjoying the protest? You're in the center of the action, my man.
I know, right? So I haven't personally seen it, right? I've seen it on TV and I've seen it on the internet where they're apparently, but
that's your plausible deniability. So you deny that you have anything to do with bringing this protest to Indonesia. It's a pure coincidence that it started. It started with your arrival into the country.
See, I don't want to touch the protest, right? Even though I have a point of view on it. Because, somebody's come to your house and says, Mr. Thomas, yes, we've seen your video. Get butt naked. It's like, oh, dude, don't make me get butt naked now. Like, I don't want that to happen, right? I don't want to be dragged off into a prison cell. But, I've seen the protests. I mean, to be fair, they're protesting for somebody in France would protest. Or somebody in America would protest.
Yeah. Well, no, I would dispute. I would dispute about this is how America would protest, because the people in Indonesia are protesting because the politicians in the Indonesian parliament voted them to give themselves a raise. It's about like $4,000 monthly. $5,000. $4,000 to $5,000 monthly housing allowance. And people are really upset about that because people here see the politicians as corrupt and useless. And they're like, what the hell are you giving yourself a raise for? And that's what they're protesting. In America, we both know, all the Americans know our politicians are the best politicians the money can buy.
Oh, they don't think that.
They're all millionaires. They're all millionaires. They're all millionaires. They're all corrupt. And they are completely useless. Well, except at stock picking, because Nancy Pelosi is the best stock picker of all time. She beats the records of all Wall Street hedge funds. Yet, there's no protest about that. We just kind of take it for granted. That's what politicians do. They F us in the ass. I mean, we just take it. Americans just take it. We spend over and take it for our politicians. But Indonesians, you know what my wife said? Because Indonesia is actually a democracy. United States apparently not, because here people actually think they can actually change policy,
And they did
by
change the
protesting.
policy. And they did.
They did.
He rescinded
They
the policy.
did change the policy.
They
Yeah,
rescinded
now
the
they have
policy.
revert back the monetary compensation for the parliamentarians in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So it's actually having an effect, compared to what was achieved in the United States. What happened to Occupy Wall Street? What came out of that? I mean, what exactly, Obama?
What's wild? The reason why I say it's kind of like anywhere else is because it's about the immiseration of the working class. It's like, dude, we are struggling, and you're giving yourselves a $5,000 a month raise to live in Jakarta. Are you out of your mind? It's rational, right? Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
They should be outraged. Hence, burning stuff and X number of people get killed.
Well, I don't know about burning stuff because, I have Indonesian friends who told me, look, we don't think it's the students that's burning stuff. I mean, there's obviously agent provocateurs. The question is, who is really behind those agent provocateurs? But it's not the students who are burning infrastructures and bus stops and stuff like that. Most of the students, they just want the politicians to not be so blatant about their corruption. But anyway, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of speculation on who might be behind those agent provocateurs, but I don't want to speculate right now. It's too early to tell. I don't have I like to point fingers, but only when I have solid evidence. Yeah,
that guy. No, it's been wild. I saw I was just watching with curiosity. It's like France. It's like, what do you mean you're creating a fuel tax where you're charging us all of this money for fuel? This is outrageous. And then you have Occupy Wall Street, just kind of not Occupy. Yellow Vests just spring up, where you get 80% of the population agree with the protests. It affects change, but that doesn't happen in the U.S. It just doesn't. It's weird.
Well, I mean, have you seen our militarized police? Have you seen the U.S. police fully deck out in tactical gears, and they have armored vehicles? Well, there's not much you can do. Like people say, oh, we have guns, dude. Have you tried to use your guns against the government? It's not going to turn out well. There are too many instances to let you know your guns are useless against the feds. You'll be crushed.
The way that works is, how many people are they going to kill? That's what it boils down to. How many people is the government willing to murder in order to maintain the policy, maintain their power? That's what it's. Because you can have all of those guns, you can have all of those tanks. The rub becomes when you have to use those things, and you have to use those things against a population that is fed up because there's nowhere else for the population to go. And so it's like, okay, are you willing to kill 1 million people to make that work? Are you willing to kill 2 million?
Well, United States government, I have my full trust in United government to do whatever it takes. I mean, they have a lot of practice. They have a lot of practice killing people abroad. It's just a matter of the empire coming home to roost. I mean,
yes.
I think right now, we're not reaching the boiling point yet in U.S. We're still the frog. We're still frog in the pot. The water is heating up, but we're not at the boiling point yet.
Yeah, but that crisis point will be reached at some point. I mean, it's a mechanical process. At some point, you get to the point where just standing still becomes harder than changing things. And when you get to that point, all hell breaks loose. But the U.S. seems to be mostly asleep, and they don't seem to see it. They don't seem to
sleepwalking over a cliff. Yeah, that's
sleepwalking over a cliff. I like that. That's a good way to put it. Carl, I brought you on because there is a prevailing, let's say, rumor. I'm going to say rumor. Now, Financial Times was reporting it as if it's not a rumor, but there's a rumor that they were going to use Chinese peacekeepers in Ukraine. Now, the Trump administration effectively said, hell no, that was never discussed. And apparently, they're claiming that this was discussed at the meeting with the Europeans. Now, this is wild because you would think that if this was discussed at the meeting with the Europeans, the first thing they would have came out screaming is, oh my God, Trump is talking about Chinese peacekeepers. So right here, the Financial Times, citing 4 people briefed on the matter, claimed on Saturday that during the meeting with the White House last week, the European leaders and Ukraine President Donald Trump suggested deploying Chinese troops as peacekeepers to post-war Ukraine. The Financial Times also claimed that the White House denied it. Yeah, no doubt. Trump proposed inviting China to supply peacekeepers to monitor a neutral zone along Ukraine's 1,300-kilometer front line as part of a peace settlement with Russia, the Financial Times reported. The White House blatantly said this is false. Quote unquote, this is false. Senior Trump administration officials said, adding that there had been, quote, no discussion of Chinese peacekeepers, according to Financial Times. China also pointed out this is false and went further in saying they were
China probably never heard about this proposal. I mean, if there was a proposal, China apparently hasn't been communicated to China yet. I don't think that happened. And China do provide a lot of peacekeepers for the UN peacekeeping missions. There were Chinese peacekeepers in Lebanon. There were Chinese peacekeepers all over Africa, in southern Sudan, for example. But China operate under the UN principle, which means they will only send peacekeeping missions under the UN flag. So you will have to be a UN Security Council approved peacekeeping mission, and then China will sign on to that. So if only there will be a UN authorized a peace deal over Ukraine, and a UN authorized peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, then it's possible for China to send its peacekeeper in there. But without the UN umbrella, I don't think China would have unilaterally saying, "Oh, we're sending our people in to be what? To be booby trap? I mean, to be tripwire? I mean, like, so China would do nothing without the UN explicit authorization. That has been the operandum for China since forever. So this might be just a brain fart of Trump administration, because Trump, he like to think out of the box. He just might be something that he throw out there, but we know Trump, he can change his mind in like 24 hours. So who knows, how real this thing was. Maybe it was a trial balloon. Was being floated out.
I don't believe this at all. I don't think Trump, can you imagine Ursula von der Leyen, Mertz, all of these guys sitting there who believe that China is helping Russia, they believe it, firmly, coming out after Trump says, yeah, I think I'm going to get the Chinese to help out and patrol it. They already think China's working with Russia. In their mind, look,
European, this is how Trump will think, we will come up with a proposal and European will accept it. But that has been the way the Trump administration have been working. You seen all those European leaders lining up like school children in the White House, waiting to be scouted by Trump. And Trump has no respect for these European leaders. Let's face it. He has no respect for weakness. And the Europeans in his eyes are spineless weaklings. He can easily bully. And so I don't think he even think about European opposition. With all these
I'm sorry to interrupt. He does care about European opposition. Axios is reporting that the Trump administration and the Atlantic, that the Trump administration is pissed off at Zelensky and the European Union because they're doing everything in their power to put the kibosh on any kind of deal. Basically saying they're doing everything in their power to stop my deal. I suspect this is the European Union setting this as a booby trap, not something that Trump said. And mind you, I think Trump lies as easily as he breathes. So agreed. I just don't get the sense that he would have put this out.
This is a trial balloon of some sort. You might be right. You might be like European Unions. You might be White House. But these are structured leaks, right? These leaks to Financial Times. They're never like just some random, in the government, some disgruntled government employees decide to give this juicy piece of information to the news. This is how Western journalism works. It's all strategic leaks. This is so this could be a trial balloon. I agree, from either side, from European Union or from from Trump to see how it's been received by the public, right? And then they plan the next step. But from China's perspective, no Chinese peacekeepers would be deployed anywhere without explicit UN Security Council authorization. So, and we're very far from that at this point. Yeah.
So, okay, I agree with you about the travel balloon thing. Like, this is very strategic leak. Now, China is pointing out that the Europeans are still repeating this and talking about this, despite the fact that China and the White House said, A, this didn't happen. And like you pointed out, China's like, this is news to us. Nobody told us this, right? You guys have been having this conversation amongst yourselves. Why would they put this leak out? I mean, because Europe up to this point hasn't wanted China anywhere near this process. They've wanted to put troops.
They are getting desperate, Jamar. They're getting desperate. Russia is winning the battlefield. Trump is ready to wash his hands, and so the Europeans, they seen themselves as holding the bag, and so they're getting desperate. And recently, there's another Ukraine. They released a video. They have captured Russian drones, and they found a Chinese parts, right? The drone parts, and that shows actually has footage from Chinese factory. Like we know this for 3 years. I mean, I tweeted, I'm like, Ukrainian patriots should really punish China by boycotting Chinese drone parts from Ukrainian drones, because both sides use Chinese drone parts. Let's just face it. Neither side could have carried on this drone warfare this long without Chinese parts from Chinese suppliers. And these are not Chinese military grade parts. These are Chinese commercial drone parts produced for like Chinese commercial drone makers like DJI, right? They're meant for you to take a picture, make a video. It's other people decide to militarize them. These are civilian commercial parts. These are not military grade drone parts that China is supplying to either side. And in fact, like, even if China tried to actively ban it, there's so many channels for either Ukraine and Russia to source them, because they can just go to a third country that has commercial relations with China where they can get Chinese commercial drone parts. So this is the reason they're now trying to blow the story up. Oh, China is supplying drone parts to Russia. So what? What are you gonna do? There's some crazy guy on Twitter, like, called a Ukrainian battle map or something. He's like, oh, this makes a factory in Guangzhou a legitimate military target. I'm like, okay, so you feel like you don't have enough targets in Russia that you decide to expand your target list against factories in China? Well, good luck with that, Good luck with that.
So this makes a Chinese factory a legitimate target? Is that what he's really arguing? Who's going to hit that factory in China?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. I tweeted you and what army? You and what army? Like, you really think you're running out of target in Russia? Apparently, that you're going to start to expand your targets to include China. I mean, like they insanity. These people, they're desperate. They're really desperate. And by the way, right now, Putin is shaking hands with Xi Jinping in Tianjin over the SCO summit.
SCO.
And also Modi was there as well. Modi actually made sure he structured a photo op where he's getting Xi Jinping, Putin, and himself all holding hands, right? And this is this it, of course, come as a response to the U.S. applying additional tariff against India for purchasing of Russian oil. And Modi is showing, hey, look, here's my buddy Putin. We're all good. Here's my buddy Xi Jinping, right? And look at them all laughing together. By the way, what Trump had helped achieve, this is the plan of Putin's predecessor as Russian prime minister, Yevgeny Primakov. This was back in 1999.
Mhm.
Russia under Primakov promoted RIC, Russia, India, China, as a triangle of anti-Western hegemony bloc. But Primakov was a little too early for his time, and now it's happening thanks to our Nobel Peace Prize candidate, Comrade Trump, for making it happening. just give that guy a Nobel Peace Prize already, Jamar.
What do you
Just
think
make
it
it
means?
happen.
Like some people are effectively saying, look, this is global shattering or globe shattering in regards to what it means. Because, India was seen as the weak partner in BRICS. India was seen as the party that didn't want to de-dollarize, that wanted to maintain a relationship with the US while also being in BRICS. It was suspected that the US was going to use India as a way of, let's say, inhibiting some of the more aggressive BRIC policy. Okay, well, that seems to be over with.
Well,
as you put out, these guys are
well,
literally
India saw BRICS differently from its other fellow BRICS member nations. Russia and China saw BRICS as an alternative against U.S.-dominated global order, whereas India saw BRICS as an alternative grouping, but not anti-Western or anti-US, because India had hoped to maintain a good working relationship with US. In fact, India was looking forward to profit from US multinational trying to diverse their supply chains out of China. They were hoping to receive a portion of the pie, right? And especially they were celebrating when Tim Cook moved some of the iPhone production from China to India. Now India produced about 20% of the iPhone. And then comes Trump, and Trump says, hey, I didn't tell you to move Apple production to India. I want you to make iPhone in the United States. And then he goes on to slap 50% tariff on India. So India's dream of being the supplanting China as suppliers of manufactured goods to United States is being shattered by Trump policies. And United States is India's number one trade partner. China is India's number two trade partner. This is why India right now is trying to repair its relationship with China. The two sides, India and China, has been working together to normalize their relationship after the very deadly 2020 border clash. And that process was already ongoing when Trump did this very helpful extra push to push India further toward normalization ties with China. And it happened. It's happening right now. And Alex Jones, I just saw Alex Jones tweeted out over a picture of Putin, Modi, and Xi in Tianjin, and he said the multipolarity is already here. This is Alex Jones, ladies and gentlemen. Alex Jones has joined the resistance. Okay, that's a joke.
He did say that he thinks Trump is going to collapse in a year. He was like, I don't think Trump is going to last a year. I find it to be interesting. I mean, all things being equal, you're looking at more than half of the global population standing on this stage. I mean, that's astonishing. And then for all these people, Putin is isolated. Putin doesn't have any friends. Look at this. That's half the globe. That's more than half the globe. China and India by itself is like half the globe.
And if you if you map out all these countries attending, you have China, India, Russia, Iran. You just covered most of the Eurasian continent right there. And on top of that, China and India adding together is like 50% of the world population, plus ASEAN. Well, Indonesia was supposed to attend, but the Indonesian president Prabowo had to cancel his trip because of protests in Jakarta, right? If the Indonesia had attended, all Southeast Asia, South Asia, China, all added together, that's more than 50% of the world population right there already. And, add that Russia, Iran, etc. I mean, this is a large grouping. This is the world island theory, Jamar.
Yes.
Mackinder, famously said if you want to dominate the world, you got to dominate the world island. And by the world island, he means Eurasia. He means this huge land mass that Trump just helped to put together. Well, it's not just Trump, but also previous American administration, like, Biden, Obama, they all helped. But Trump is the one that's putting all the pieces together. And this is why Trump is my president. He's my president for multipolarity, Jamar.
What do you think the response is going to be? I mean, because obviously, so Lula has called for an emergency session of BRICS. And obviously, Trump has been going after Brazil and South Africa and India. He held off on China for the time being. But you can tell that there's a certain specificity to the countries that he's really leaning into going after. And I'm going to bring in Venezuela. I mean, part of the issue that comes up with Venezuela is Russia and China, and even Iran on some level, working more closely with Venezuela, especially China putting in, I think, billions of dollars, or either hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in order to exploit the oil.
You know what Trump is doing, Jamar? Trump already declared BRICS as anti-American alliance. Yes, and now he's going after what he perceived to be the weaker members of the BRICS. Because he knows he can't touch China. He already knew that after that brief trade war in May, when Chinese ships stopped coming to Los Angeles. So he knows he can't repeat that. And Chinese still have him by the balls over the rare earth supply chain. So he can't touch China.
He mentioned that. He says China's going to have to give us rare earth minerals or else. It's like, or else what?
Or else, he said, or else I'm going to slap 200% tariff. Yeah. And they're like, go ahead. How is that going to solve anything? You're still not getting the rare earth. No rare earth for you. But so Trump is not going to, he realized, okay, China is untouchable. But you know what? Let me go after the weaker members. Let me go after Venezuela. Let me go after Iran. Let me go after India. Let me go after the Brazil. Let me go after Brazil. Yeah, let me go after Brazil, because Trump is a bully, Jamar. Bully. Trump does not. He only respects strength, and he will prey on weakness, and precisely because countries like India, they don't have a smart card to play when it comes to bilateral relationship with United States, because a lot of Indian companies, they depend on providing service, back-end office work for U.S. multinationals, that Trump's felt, I got them by the balls. They will have to come to Washington and bend the knee and kiss my ring. But India, to give India credit, Indians' leadership, they actually have more backbones than the European. Well, everybody has more backbones than the Europeans, but they actually push back against U.S. They say, you know what? You're not going to push us around. We're not going to open our agricultural market for you, because that's another condition Trump wanted. Trump want India basically to cut off its traditional ties with Russia, because India sources a lot of its weapon system from Russia. India imports a lot of Russian oil. Instead, Trump want India to buy U.S. weapons and to buy U.S. oil and gas, right? And India say, no, we don't want to do that. Why? What's in it for us? U.S. energy is much more expensive. And F-35 is a piece of crap. You just had another crash. And on top of that, U.S. want India to open its agricultural sector for heavily subsidized American farm producers. So because China are not buying American farm produce anymore. China are switching to buy beef from Brazil, to buy soybeans from Brazil. So Trump wants India to open its market for American farm produce, but India has 60% of its workforce employed in the agricultural sector. There's no way they're going to allow a flood of American farm produce to come in to devastate their major major employer of their labor. So they're not going to budge on that issue. They're not going to budge on Russia. So this is why India right now, Modi is shaking hands with Putin and Xi Jinping and laugh it up right now, because they feel like they need to stand up for themselves. Good for them. unlike the Europeans. and so Brazil, and that's another case. I think Brazil over long term, there will be. I think the U.S. freak out over Brazil and Venezuela is a little more visceral, because U.S. also always sees this as its quote unquote backyard. Since the Monroe Doctrine, and now you see Brazil, Venezuela developing ties with powers outside of the Western Hemisphere, with Russia, with China. And U.S. is having a freak out about that. This is why they're freaking out about the quote unquote Chinese ownership over Panama Canal ports. Trump want to levy extra tariff against goods exported from the Chinese finance megaports in Peru, and they want to now put the extra squeeze on Venezuela because they feel like okay, we can't touch China. China is too far. We're now winning against Russia in Ukraine, but maybe we can still apply our pressure in the Western Hemisphere where the U.S. is still stronger and is within our reach. But given the particularity of Trump, Trump is the type of person, he likes to claim easy victories. Yes. If it's an easy victory, he will sign on for 100%. Then he can claim victory, then claim he's a great peacemaker and give me a Nobel Peace Prize, etc., etc. But I don't think they will be able to make any difference, because U.S. has been besieging countries like Cuba and Venezuela for decades, and right now they're sending 4,000 troops to sail around Venezuela. Yeah. This is designed to intimidate and cause panic inside Venezuela. But I don't think that will work, because I don't think they actually intend to carry out a military operation, because 4,000 troops, this is just going to be another Bay of Pigs if they do intend to carry out their threat. And so it's really a show of intimidation. They're trying to foment something, possibly another color revolution inside Venezuela. But I don't think they will succeed.
How do you think these BRICS countries are going to respond? I mean, if they're having this emergency meeting, well, two things. One, the fact that the main parties of BRICS are meeting now. Well, met yesterday, I suppose, by their time.
Well, so BRICS and SCO are different, right? BRICS is different. Economic. It's the overlap, major overlap. BRICS right. is the economic cooperation forum. Right. SCO is a security cooperation forum that started by Russia and China.
Is securing their economic capability. Like meaning they overlap, the countries overlap.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of room for cooperation among BRICS members to push back against the Trump tariff, because that is their economic. That's not their sphere, the economic cooperation. And as I mentioned on your show many times before, these countries individually they might have a weaker hand dealing with the United States, but if they can present a united front and then to deal with U.S. as a bloc, they will have much more negotiation power, and they will have a lot more bargaining power.
Meaning, is that what you think all of these leaders are going to do, and BRICS are going to do?
I don't think that they intended to do that in the beginning, but I think Trump's escalating action is now forcing the BRICS members to coalesce together. And I think, right now, China is already showing solidarity with India on the trade issue. They say, look, we're against bullying, unilateral bullying on international trade. We demand that our sovereignty to trade with whoever we want be respected, right? And so, yeah, I think, and there's another for countries like Brazil, for example. China has already diverted a lot of trade from United States to Brazil, particularly sourcing agricultural products. China on Chinese supermarket now, the American beef are being replaced with Brazilian beef. They're getting more soybean from Brazil. They don't need United States. China has prepared for the last 7 years to decouple from the United States, and so Brazil will find a ready buyer in China's burgeoning market. And what Trump's doing, slapping 50% tariff against Brazil, is going to only further accelerate that process of Brazil looking east. And I like right now, it's like what Trump administration is doing is like the monkeys throwing feces on the wall to see what sticks, right? But they don't even care if any particular crap sticks on the wall. They're just like throwing everything and hoping at least one thing stick. I think I don't put too much stock on any grand strategy behind Trump's actions. So as long as BRICS members can come together and have a coordinated action, I think they will be fine. I think they will do fine because, as I mentioned, BRICS in the economic terms, they're in power purchase parity terms. BRICS economy is already larger than G7. Right. And that gap continued to grow because the BRICS members are growing. Russia is growing faster than European countries, and add India and China. They already have they have the market, they have the energy. The BRICS members, they contain a lot of the energy producers. A lot of the countries in oil producing countries as well. So they have all the energy they need. They have all the commodity they need. They have a huge market, huge population, and China is a manufacturing superpower. They really don't need United States.
Why not come out and say that? Meaning, when they came out with their SCO summit announcement, and many of these countries have been under the thumb of the U.S., the tariffs and everything else. Why not come out and say, we're going to work in tandem to push back what to deal with? They can put it whatever language they want it on the tariffs that Donald Trump is going after our individual nations with. And they can even enumerate X tariff on this country, X tariff on that country, 50% on India, 50% on Brazil, etc. They can say, we are no longer going to tolerate this, and we're going to work as a collective union in order to push back. They can use whatever term they want, but to make it clear that this is intolerable. And as you point out, we're not going to accept you, 4% of the globe, bullying all of us. Or that's just not what they do.
Well, we'll have to wait. Well, first of all, SCO right now, this is a security forum. This is separate from BRICS. So I don't expect them to make a statement on the trade issue necessarily. And also, there's some nations like Armenia and Azerbaijan leadership who are also kind of cozy with Washington right now. So there's an interesting dynamic going on there, and so I don't expect a statement coming out of SCO, but in the coming BRICS meeting, we might hear more statement. Brazil is obviously really keen on that because Trump is basically interfering in their domestic politics by conditioning the 50% tariff on release of Bolsonaro, who this is completely internal Brazilian matter. Like United States is imposing its will on Brazil, trying to challenge Brazilian judiciary system. I mean, that's not acceptable to any sovereign nation. So I think I think we'll just have to wait until the next BRICS meeting. I expect with the emergency meeting being called, I expect they might be working something right now behind the closed door, because a lot of these meetings, right, it's really mostly for photo ops. A lot of the solid groundwork already been laid out, already been worked behind the scenes by diplomats from these countries, and when they meet, it's really to sign the deal and make it public. So I'm sure they're already working furiously right now, trying to figure out a coordinated response to the current Trump tariff war.
Interesting. Interesting. I want to show you a clip. This is somebody who's being very honest. Who's being very honest. That to a U.S. audience, this level of honesty feels and sounds okay. To the rest of the world, this is a terrifying level of honesty coming out of a U.S. I'm trying to figure out who she is. U.S. General Laura Richardson. U.S. General Laura Richardson. Listen to what General Richardson. Listen to what she has to say.
If I talk to my number two adversary in the region, Russia, I mean, I've got, of course, the countries, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua with Russia relationships. But why this region matters, with all of its rich resources and rare earth elements. You've got the lithium triangle, which is needed for technology today. 60% of the world's lithium is in the lithium triangle: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. You just have the largest oil reserves, light sweet crude, discovered off of Guyana over a year ago. You have Venezuela's resources as well, with oil, copper, gold. We have the Amazon, lungs of the world. We have 31% of the world's fresh water in this region too. I mean, it's just off the charts. We have a lot to do. This region matters. It has a lot to do with national security, and we need to step up our game.
Ain't that amazing? I love her honesty. It's not about freedom and democracy. It's not about your sovereign states. It's not about any of that. We have national security issues with your reserves.
Your resources. Your resources present a national security problem for the United States.
Yes.
Because you have too much of it.
It's like, Russia, China, these places. But the issue is the resources. We need to get our hands and control those resources. It's national security for us.
This is why, Jamar, this is why I really appreciate Trump administration for bringing honesty to the foreign affairs messaging. Before Obama, Biden, the world sugar-coated about, we work with our partners, in private-public partnership to promote, to build a world back better. And, that never happened. But Trump just rip away the emperor's new clothes and say, hey, give us the oil. Give us the gold. And they're going after Venezuela because Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserve. And the type of oil Venezuela produces, they're the heavy crude. And just so happened that most of the U.S. refinery in the southern United States are built to refine heavy crude. Match exactly the type of oil that Venezuela is producing. So U.S. has been, butthurt about being pushing out of Venezuelans oil sector for decades now, and they want back. They want to be back. They want to be back to be dominating that. And this is they mentioned lithium. I don't even know why they mentioned lithium, because lithium is important because the EV transition, and right. Trump already said he's not for EV transition. He wants to go all the way with oil and gas. But anyway, so South America, they still see South America as Americans' backyard. Even though, like, if you look at Brazil is actually very, very far from the U.S. But they still see this as their kind of a sandbox. And this is why they find it increasingly alarming that China is putting investment in the region. China is bringing its Belt and Road Initiative all over Latin America. This is why they pressured Panama to cancel its high-speed rail project with China, for example. And for what? But Panama had to do it because last time U.S. invaded Panama, I'm old enough to remember U.S. invading Panama under the pretext of stopping the drug stopping the drug traffic, and that's the same excuse they're using right now against Venezuela. But it's not about drugs, folks. It's all about oil. It's all about resources, and this is well, at least everybody knows now, what U.S. is about. That's what I appreciate about Trump. I appreciate his honesty.
Yeah, that's an amazing clip. I mean, like, look, I don't know the full version of the clip, but the fact that she's like, yeah, and she owns, right? China and Russia are adversaries. China and Russia are playing in our quote unquote backyard. And we have a lot of work to do because there are a lot of resources that we need to get our hands on. And it's an issue of national security. Imagine me saying that. Carl, your car is an issue of my security. Like the notion that you are making the argument that something somebody else owns, that they are sovereign over, meaning their country, their resources and everything else, that is an issue for me because, hashtag reasons. That is a fascinating statement. She's from the Atlantic Council. This is how these people think. Like when I was having a conversation with Warwick, and Warwick was given this vision for the SCO, this idea that countries are invaluable, there is no hegemon in this, we're working together, your security is my security, meaning the fact that you're safe is on some level my security because you have no reason to come after me. All of these things are beautiful views and possibilities of the world. And as I pointed out to him, not everybody thinks that way. She's not thinking that way. Her thinking is, you have stuff that we want. And we are going to define that as a matter of principle and policy as a national security issue. Now, God doesn't get involved. Nobody stops any sociopath from doing that, right? Nobody stops somebody who decides, I'm going to steal that car. Nobody stops the guy from stealing the car, short of the guy screwing up and getting caught. I'm saying she believes that because we have enough force and leverage and control as a hegemon, somehow it is okay for us to prioritize your resources as our main concern. That is mind-blowing. Like these are the sociopaths. And she's openly saying it. It's not like this is in quiet whispers, like behind the scenes, like, yeah, this is what we really think. But we go out and say, no, these countries are sovereign, they're invaluable, and we need to protect the democracy and blah, blah, blah. They're not hiding the ball. They're not hiding the ball. They think it's okay. They know the American public will accept it because, hey, well, we're America, right? So it's okay for us to do this. I'm just finding that to be amazing. Give me your take on something else in relation to this. I have a hypothesis. I call it hypothesis. That an argument is being made across the world, ideologically. In one sense, you have SCO, BRICS, and they are making this argument of, we want countries to be equals. We want countries to work with one another. We don't want countries to use force with one another. Force is the last resort that we want to effectively engage in. We believe that safety is something that has to be shared by everybody or nobody, meaning you're not safe unless I'm safe, because if I'm unsafe, I'm going to make your life miserable, and vice versa. And they are espousing that argument to the world in what you've just seen in regards to the summit that they just held, or BRICS in regards to the summit that they held. And then you get her, who's the honest imperialist. And you get people like Trump, who's an honest imperialist. I'm going to put tariffs on you if you don't do what I tell you to do. This is naked hegemony, right? You get the European leaders that lumped into this kind of white Western world, this 14-15% of the globe, that's decided to put their lot in with the United States in order to make this argument, because they believe that their lot is best served with a main power that they are no longer, associated with. Like, if you ask Britain to put 10,000 troops somewhere, they'd be hard pressed to do it. If you ask Europe to come up with the European military, they'd be hard pressed to do it. These people are idiots. You got people like Kalis, that twit, who goes out, China is bigger than Russia. And if we can't take down Russia, then how are we going to beat China? It's so confusing. Like, you get that from Europe. Am I insane on this? That it seems to be that the world, or let's say power centers of the world, economic, military, are making two very different arguments and saying that the world, on some level, gets to choose. And I think many of the world is choosing, even though some may be scared to kind of admit it openly. That seems to be what's taking place, kind of like the Soviet Union and the United States at one point. Give me a take on that. Do you think I'm overplaying what seems to be happening? That they're not really making the argument, it just seems that they're making the argument.
Okay, so I mean, U.S. Well, I just remind me of the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, when Putin says it doesn't matter who is the U.S. president, as long as U.S. leaders do not give up this mindset of hegemony, or this zero-sum mindset, nothing is going to change. And I don't think the U.S. I don't expect any change on the U.S. elite part. Well, for one thing, there hasn't been, like I said, we haven't riot on the street over their useless and corrupt ways yet. And so but the rest of the world is already changing. They're already moving forward without U.S. But the difference between today and Cold War .1, I fully believe the U.S. elite is trying to engineer trying to bring back Cold War 2.0. Because they thought, okay, we know how Cold War 1.0 worked. We won that. We crushed the Soviet Union. So it's just going to be a matter of time when China collapses, the Russia collapses, Iran collapses, whatever. But right now the world is very different. And what China and Russia are doing is also very different from Soviet Union. They're not out to destroy the United States or the Western world. They're not even trying to export an ideology to the Western world. They just want to be left alone. And they actually are now working, on their own development without involving the West. But they're fully open to have a normalized relationship with the West at some point, right? They do not have that zero-sum mindset that's infected that mind bug that's infected in Washington, right? Yeah. So China, I said many times, China is not out to destroy the United States. China actually would like the United States to prosper because the United States still remain one of its largest trading partners. You don't want to kill your customer, right? And so yeah, it doesn't make sense, right? So China actually want United States to be a stable, functioning society, but just less crazy, just chill the F out, right? I mean, just like, sir, this is a Wendy's, right? Just order your freaking hamburger and get the F out, but have a nice day. That's China's attitude, right? And then but so they're not looking to have a Cold War style confrontation. So what they're doing, they're building their own strength. They're building their own alternative multipolar world. And West, at any point, feel free to join. They're not trying to exclude the West from anything. It's the West that's trying to exclude themselves. U.S. now is building a wall around United States and its vassal states, right, to try to wall them off from the rest. Because U.S. think it's competing for global hegemony against China, but what actually China is doing, they're just trying to build global connectivity. So when United States is trying to wall off China, what they're actually building a wall around U.S., its European allies or vassals or whatever, but the rest of the world has already moved on, and oh man, this is many people think that we're gonna be able to win this competition against China, which is nonsense because they think they're putting everything right now in with technological breakthrough that we're gonna win. We're gonna put our basket in AI. If we just develop generative AI, AGI, and then we will get to Skynet and Terminator first, then China will be screwed, right? That's their plan right now. That's their plan. And this is why there's $500 billion investment supposedly into the Stargate project, right? And this is a huge AI bubble that's been building up right now. But United States don't have the electric generation for that to support this kind of the AI expansion. China does. China actually has lot of overcapacity in power generation. China built a lot of thermal power plants because they are building out a lot of solar and wind power. Solar and wind power are unstable source of power, so they have to build thermal power plants to do load balancing, which means right now people are pointing finger at China. Oh, China! Why China adding new coal plants? China is adding new coal plants because they're actually building out whole swaths of solar and wind power, and those Chinese coal plants, right now sitting at 50% capacity, which means in a crunch, China can easily ramp up their power generation 200% quite easily. And United States simply do not have that kind of extra capacity to supply its AI to its AI boom right now. There's no extra power for those AI data centers they have planned. I mean, like they killed off right now the cheapest energy they could deploy right now is solar. They're cutting themselves. Guess who is making solar cheap? This China. China's overcapacity in solar panels is making solar cheap, and that's why Africa, a lot of the global South nations are adopting solar because of the cheap Chinese solar panels. United States is willingly cutting that off. So because Trump decided, no, we're not going to go to solar because that's all environmental BS. We're all going to go full oil and gas, drill, baby, drill. And again, even in the oil and gas, United States is not building enough gas-powered generators to generate that electricity. So what if they really succeed in do this Cold War 2.0 and trying to wall themselves off? What you're going to have is U.S. and European going to be stuck in the old fossilized economy with older technology, hydrocarbon-based technology, while China and the rest of the world, they will push forward with electrification, and they will have cheap, abundant solar energy to draw from, and they're going to power ahead. And China is already applying their AI. China has applied their AI in robots, in advanced manufacturing, whereas in the United States, AI is still chatbots, because that's U.S. advantage is talking. They do a lot of there's a lot of word cells in the United States. They generate a lot of PowerPoint presentation. So China is actually using AI, whereas in US, what does the AI produce? Their AI is not producing profit right now, even in the United States. They're pouring huge, increasing amount of investment into developing AI data centers, but AI in the United States actually are not being used in a product. They're not generating the kind of revenue or profit that would justify the level of investment that's going to the AI bubble right now in the US. Whereas China, they're actually applying AI intelligently into robotics, into advanced manufacturing. So who is going to win? I mean, it's just going to be a matter of time when that AI bubble going to burst in the United States. And then, that's not... The United States is stuck forever in this kind of asset bubble and then move on to the next. I have witnessed this since I started working in the U.S. in 1999. At the end of the first internet bubble, and then after that it was a housing bubble, and now we're in the AI bubble, and it's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. And whereas China and the rest of the world are moving on with sustainable development, I would argue. This is my take.
They're trying to get AGI. Like, basically, they're trying to get not just chatbots. Like, they want the ability to have something that can function and work. Like, for example, if you say, hey, create me a resume and submit my resume to all of these channels. And after you submit my resume to the channels, keep a lookout for people who respond. And that the thing goes out and does that, meaning it understands you enough where it can function with this kind of basic intelligence.
But Jamar, their argument for AGI is that they're going to create the similar or superior intelligence to human beings, so they can replace all these white collar office workers with AI. So
that's what they want.
you are going to throw a shit tons of people out of work,
They don't
and
care,
then
though.
and they don't care though. But who is going to buy your product? I mean, sure, the AI, the robot, the AI, they don't need to sleep. They can work 24/7. But
Yep.
capitalism, the hyper capitalism that runs the United States, depend on consumerism, right? Who is going to be your consumers when you fired off all your human workers?
They don't think
Who is
that
going to
way, Carl.
consume?
They don't think that way. I mean, like, look, I can tell you, in their minds, workers are expensive. And if we can get rid of them, we're better off. And as you point out, if you do that, who's going to buy your products? And then they're like, maybe we can have a basic income that we can give people. Maybe they think that way, like that we can, separate our need for workers. Because at that point, you have protests and you have people who can go on strike and you have all of this, meaning workers have a certain amount of power in a society by definition of the fact that they're the ones who are doing the work. You don't need a labor union if you have robots doing all the jobs, right? And then, but you get a lot of angry people that you have to deal with. And so maybe their thought is, well, we can have a universal basic income. We can pay people a basic amount. And on top of paying people a basic amount, we can now have robots to do the labor. So we don't have to worry about those people getting blue and tired. And, oh, Susie broke up with her girlfriend or boyfriend. And so Susie is not working well today. You can eliminate this most expensive aspect of work for the capitalists. I agree with you. That's exactly what they think, right? That's the reason why they move jobs overseas. Cheaper labor. Okay, but what if now I can get a robot to do it, and he can do it for $5 as opposed to 15 or 20 because these employees are complaining about not having stuff to eat. You're right. You're right. That's what they want. I agree with you. That's what they want. By the way, how's China handling that? Because as you point out, China has radicalized manufacturing. I mean, I've seen some of those factories where like almost the entire process in regards to those factories are done by either machines, AI, robots, is automated. I've seen some of their greenhouses. Oh God, the greenhouses are astonishing. Where you would have this huge building and you would have plants all the way up the building and you would have it being automated so you can cut the price of food, to some insane degree. How does
Jamar,
China reconcile that?
you still need AI engineers. You still need people. You still need, I mean, like you cannot remove people completely from the picture. I mean, China right now, the world's top AI engineers, 50% of them come out of Chinese universities.
Yes.
Right. And of course Trump is trying to cut that off as well, but he just did another turnabout face. It's like, oh, I'm gonna allow 600,000 Chinese students to come into the U.S. And but before that, he said he was gonna ban, right? And it turns out that of course alarmed his voter base because everybody's like, what? You're gonna allow 600,000 Chinese students to come into the country? And then they just clarify, oh no, we actually mean continue the policy as it has been currently, which means they'll continue to grant visa to come to the United States. The highest number of Chinese who come to U.S. to study in any given year is 300,000 Chinese students at any time studying university students. They say we're just going to continue to grant a visa 2 years in a row. So that's how they got the 600,000 Chinese student figure. So it doesn't mean they're going to bring additional 600,000 Chinese students to U.S. They're just going to, as in Trump's word, he's going to allow Chinese students to study in U.S. universities. But in China, you asked the question how China handles that. All these advanced manufacturing that's taking place in China, they still require human labor, but they require a very different, very specific type of human labor. The laborers they're well trained, well educated, who may be AI engineers, who may be advanced, engineers in robotics. But China is graduating about 9 times more STEM graduates than United States every year. So that number is increasing. And as year goes by, the number of Chinese students attending university as a percentage of population is also increasing, and as well as the number of total STEM graduate that China continue to produce. This is how China wins. The China, because they continue to invest in their own population. They're more and more people are getting better education, and that's how they upgrade their economy, by investing in their people. And so yes, a lot of jobs, manufacturing jobs, old labor intensive jobs like making toys, making shoes, those jobs will be gone. Those jobs will either be automated or shift to countries like Vietnam or Southeast Asia. That's already happening today. But the Chinese children, Chinese graduates who are coming out of the school, they're going to get better jobs. They're going to work in those managing those automated plants. They will be the ones that design the next AI breakthrough. Yeah. And then there's always the service economy, Jamar. There's always the TikToks, the Douyin economy, the influencers. That's where we are ahead of the curve, Jamar. Right. We are ahead of the curve.
Well, we're being replaced too now.
Entertainers.
Well, you have AI that can do that. Have you seen these AI?
Oh, no AI can be as entertaining as me. No way, man. I refuse to believe that.
True.
Well, I'm not just providing knowledge. I'm also providing entertainment. We're in the age of infotainment, Jamar. We're entertainers.
There will be a moment where there will be a hard time to tell the difference between a person who is, let's say, doing the news versus an AI doing the news. They will be reading a script. They will take on the mannerisms, the persona of the person that oh God, man, it's our jobs are not safe. Have you seen that many of the I love this channel called what is the name of it? It slipped my mind the moment that I thought of it. He does book reviews, and he goes into kind of the tenor of the book and give you kind of the meat of the book. And he was making this point, like in the beginning of his videos, he's like, we are being replaced by AI readers, because the AI is getting more humanistic in the way that it tries to read. It can read it with different voices, with different inflections, and those type of things. And he's like, help support independent creators against the AI that's coming to take our jobs. That is amazing that's where we are. Like, even this element of humanity of being able to recount information is now being taken over by AI itself. That's terrifying. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be terrifying.
I give it 10 years. I give it at least 10 years. I think we still have 10 years shelf life, Jamar.
That's terrifying. Oh, that's terrifying. When I was in software, we used to, I was a software engineer for a decade. And when I first got into the business, you could, let's say 10 years before I got into the business, a YouTube page can make maybe $1 million. Like, you could charge for a web page. And then by the time I was there, I think it was like maybe 100K, depending upon the complexity of the website. Today, you have WYSIWYGs. Like, any rando person doesn't know a bit of code can go and build the site just by dropping stuff onto a page. And most of the technical details of the stuff is just automated. It's coming for our jobs, Carl. It's coming for our jobs. I'm curious how China's going to deal with that. Because, by the way, that's not just a U.S. problem. I mean, when you get to the point where trucks are automated, so going from point A to point B to take materials, that truck is automated. Ubers, taxi drivers, all this stuff is automated. Okay, well, in the U.S., you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out of work right off the bat just from that technological change. Service industry, you walk into a 7-Eleven or some kind of gas station, it automatically dings your card for whatever you pick up and buy. No cashier is necessary, so maybe you had 5 cashiers, now you're down to 1. Supermarkets, you can already see take place, meaning that change is going to not just happen here, it is also going to happen in China, a country of 1.4 million people, 4 billion people. Oh, that is going to be a hell of a change.
Automated luxury communism, Jamar. That's what's. I think there will have to be some kind of universal basic income I think that because you now you have abundance, right? Now you with a new technology breakthrough, you're gonna have you have created abundance. Now, again, you're gonna have running into the problem with where's your consumers, right? So you have to redistribute the wealth somewhat.
Right.
Right now the problem is not the fact that technology is advancing so fast. The problem is really the problem in the distribution. Right now all the wealth is going to the top 1%, and they're trying to discard the rest of the 99% as unnecessary, right? But that by itself is not sustainable. You can still need consumers. I guess there's some tech lords, tech bros in Silicon Valley think
Peter Thiel.
they will be on the top of the pyramids. They'll have all these robots and AI serving them, right? But like, if the AI is smarter than you, why do they need you? Why would they be serving you? What made you so important?
Terrifying.
I don't know.
Because by the way, this is a question of consciousness.
Yeah.
This becomes a question of consciousness. Well, there are two questions with this. A, it's a political issue. China will be able to handle this issue better than the U.S. because China seems to be more likely to say, we are indeed a communist country. We did what we needed to do to get to the point of abundance. And so now we're going to ensure that the population is attended to and taken care of. I don't see that in the U.S. That will be a hard sell in the U.S. to China.
I think there will have to be, to make it work. To make it work, there's going to have to be some kind of redistribution of wealth via universal basic income, because otherwise they're going to have riots, man. There will be finally there will be riots on the streets. I mean, like you get finally what you witness in Jakarta. You will see that in streets of New York and Los Angeles, and I think they will have to. I think they will be forced to. I mean, I just don't see a way out of that.
That would be a good thing, though. That would be necessary. Like, because personally, I think you should shoot for abundance. I think that's the point of machines. I think that's the point of robots, to get yourself to the point, a society to the point where you don't need to spend 40 hours a day doing something you don't want to do, etc. And to create a society where scarcity is just not.
So you can pursue the job that you do love to do, right?
Exactly.
We will also talk about doing the things you truly love. Then we're not having to going through the chore of doing quote unquote work for compensation. Now it's you have all these abundance, so you can pursue things that truly interest you, like talking like shit posting for me, on the internet. That's my passion.
It's like, I spend 18 hours talking shit on Twitter. Carl, man, I have always enjoyed these conversations. I always appreciate these conversations. The audience loves you. Thank you for this. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast at Steel Silk In, and you can subscribe and support the podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl, you are fantastic. Thank you for this, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamar. Anytime.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right.
Bye-bye.
Carl is a great guest. I'm going to go to another great guest. First time on the show, and I'm deeply appreciative of him being on the show. We have the man himself, Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern is an American political activist, former Central Intelligence Agency officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990, and in the 1980s, chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in preparing the president's daily brief. That's a hell of a job. How you doing, Ray? You doing okay today?
I'm doing well, Jamal. Need to wake up a little bit more, but I have some coffee here, so I'm in good shape.
It's okay. I'm sorry. I know it's early. Doing a show from 7 to 10 it can be rough sometimes. So I do appreciate it. You sent me a video, and I was fascinated by this video. There's other things I want to talk about, but I do want to hit what you said. You went to, I guess, a speaking engagement by Senator Mark Kelly. And after that engagement, you put out this tweet. I found the tweet funny, and I found the event pretty wild that you sent me. You said, what is a skunk at Senator Kelly's picnic today, quote, cry for the beloved Democrats' country, unquote. My dad cried when FDR died. I cried when John Kennedy was killed. I almost cried watching Kelly's 2-minute filibuster. Only 3 of the 250 there would talk to the skunk later. Brainwash. Now, the video that you sent was this one, and I'm going to play a small part of it. This is you trying to have a conversation with all of these people effectively about Russiagate. And I got to be honest with you, I could have told you how they were going to respond before you said anything out of your mouth. But this is the clip.
The CIA and James Comey of the FBI were deliberately lying about Russia favoring Hillary Clinton and wanting her to win. And they did that consequentially because most Americans, I dare say most of you, believe that the Russians are evil incarnate, and that if Trump said, let's go into Ukraine, you probably would support it because you're brainwashed. My question is that there was a national intelligence. May I have it? No.
Quiet down, folks. I'm interested in the question.
Okay. The question is this: there's a national intelligence officer. I was a national intelligence officer. It's about as high as you can get. Okay. Ask a question. She tried to whistleblow, and she came to your committee and said, "Look, these guys are lying through their teeth about Russiagate, and you wouldn't see her, and neither would anyone on your."
Oh, it's freezing. Come on. Okay, needless to say, you did not get the best reception at that at that meeting. And what's wild about it is after you finished speaking, the audience got hostile for one. And Kelly went on, like you say, filibuster, where he apparently just talked about, well, yeah, Russia, China, Iran. Oh, there it is. It was like Russia, China, Iran wanted to get involved in our elections, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He went on that line.
In 2020.
About Israel, by the way, but Russia, China, and Iran.
Right. And he diverted the conversation to 2020 when he said, well, Trump did win, but I was talking about 2016. Okay.
Right.
That's when it all happened. And that's why, people need to know this. I just reminded myself that I did get in the major point here, and that is that Russiagate, that is charging the Russians with interfering in our elections to defeat Hillary Clinton. No matter what you think of Hillary Clinton, this is consequential because 8 years later, these people, as was demonstrated there, are so brainwashed, so willing to think that Putin is about to take over all of Europe, which of course he's not. That they would march like lemmings off to war. Most of them were Army or Navy or Marine Corps, Air Force veterans. They would march off to war, and not many many would not come back. So I thought at this veterans meeting that I should bring up the fact that the key here is good intelligence. Now, if it's corrupted or if it's dishonest, as it was during Vietnam, as it was before Iraq. Remember all those weapons of mass destruction that were supposed to exist in Iraq? Well, they didn't. Okay? And as it is now, with respect to how Trump got in, they tried to prevent him from getting in. And once he was in, they concocted this memorandum, which now this whistleblower that I mentioned to Senator Kelly, this whistleblower has come to the head of national intelligence, and the head of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has put out. My goodness, I printed out last night because I wanted to see. This is what it looks like. Okay, now why all these? This is the last page. Why all this blackening? Well, in truth, it's to protect this whistleblower. We don't know. Well, certainly the people in the agency know who she is because of her position between 2015 and 2020, right? But they don't want the world to know for fear that she will suffer, well, that she might even be harmed in some way, not just rhetorically. So when I asked, long story short, we think it's a woman, very senior, Deputy National Intelligence Officer, is pretty senior, okay? She goes to the various committees of the Congress that are supposed to be exercising oversight over the CIA, and she can't get in the front door, okay? She went to the Senate Intelligence Committee, on which Senator Kelly sits, and she couldn't get in the door. And so I asked him, why did you rebuff her? And by the way, what's her name? And he said, well, I don't know his name. And I said, well, have you asked? Well, no, I have the power to find out who it is. Well, find out who it is, for God's sake. No, that's heckling. I'm sorry. This is just asking questions of a guy who should know and usually pontificates because he's got all kinds of Air Force, Army, Navy patches on his suit, which I forsook for simply this Veterans for Peace shirt. I'm on their board and on their advisory board, and I'm very proud to be part of that organization.
Yeah, they're not going to care. They're just not going to care. Like the Democratic Party has invested so much into this Russiagate narrative that they firmly believe it from flesh to bone, despite the fact that this was something Hillary Clinton cooked up, planned and dropped like a bomb with this notion of somehow inhibiting what Donald Trump is effectively doing. But I appreciate you going there and telling them that they were brainwashed.
Yeah, I probably just said that you were misled, but that was a little much. But it's so hard. When I said conspiracy, you probably should have said something else, but it is. It's the deep state. It's the people who have the leverage in our government, CIA, FBI, and lots of other folks. It's the Dems in this case, the Democrats, but it's also the media, okay? Now, if the media can't come around and give the time of day to what Tulsi Gabbard has revealed, but instead criticizes for revealing the identity of somebody undercover, my God. So if the media plays the role that it has played up till now, Pulitzer Prizes for making stories out of whole cloth. Well, not whole cloth. The whole cloth is prepared at the CIA, and they bring the whole cloth down to the Washington Post, and they run the thing. So if the media, well, let me give you an example, Jamal. I mean, why do they feel so damn sensitive about this? Well, okay. The big thing at the beginning was the Russians hacked into the Democratic National Committee emails, okay? Now, why was that so significant? Well, maybe people don't remember, but those emails reflected the reality that Hillary Clinton and her DNC associates had tilted the playing field so much against Bernie Sanders that it can be said correctly that she stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders, okay? Now,
right.
So in the middle of June, Julian Assange announces, we have emails relating to Hillary Clinton pending publication. Oh my God. So the 15th of June, okay? Put that down, okay? Now, the Democratic National Convention started on the 25th of July. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, we know now from this documentary evidence that they tried everything besides lawful and so forth to make sure that Trump was identified with the Russians and that Hillary's. Anyhow, they tried everything they could, but then they won. Okay. Now, right after Assange announced this in mid-June, June 15th, 2016, there was a fellow who worked at the Democratic National Committee. His name is or was Seth Rich. He had access to all these emails. He's the only person that we know had access to those emails and was murdered on the 10th of July, less than a month later. Now, it was real strange because they thought it would be they said it was a robbery, but the robbers didn't take any watch or any wallet or anything. They just shot him in the back of the head, okay? And then the FBI, for some reason, came in, scooped in, and took the case from the Metropolitan Police of Washington and took both of Seth Rich's computers, his personal one. And I said, okay, so wait, and then the FBI lied to several courts saying they didn't have any information on Seth Rich. What's my point? Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, offered a $20,000 reward for the apprehension of whoever knew who killed Seth Rich. Now, he was immediately asked, "Whoa, so was he your source? Was he?" He says, "We don't reveal our sources." So that's always been sort of a case in limbo. Did Robert Mueller, the investigator, go and ask Julian Assange? No, I guess he forgot. Did that fellow, what's his name, Durham, John Durham, go and ask us? No, they forgot to ask us. Who knows? Assange does. So it was all confected. Now, what I'm saying here is that this is not only taking liberties with the law and with regulations, which it is, of course. And let me just explain why they thought they could get away with it. James Comey, head of the CIA, head of the FBI, put in his book, written a year later. The book was called Higher Loyalty. Well, the higher loyalty that we all owe is to the Constitution and the law, not to anything else. Anyhow, the higher loyalty book, he says, quote, I was operating in an environment in which Hillary Clinton was sure to be the next president of the United States, period, end quote. Now, what's my point? If you're operating in that kind of environment where you're sure that Hillary Clinton, well, you're going to do everything you can to help her. You're not going to jail for doing this, for violating. You're going to become attorney general, or you're going to get a cash bonus for. So that's an aside. Now, what happened? Well, Seth Rich was killed, and now for the next several years, it was considered conspiracy. You are a conspiracy theorist if you so much as mentioned his name. But there was no resolution to his murder. And as I say, the FBI took all those computers. They have the evidence, and they have refused to share it with court orders. Now, here it is, you have Julian Assange saying these things are really good. They were released 3 days before the Democratic National Convention, namely on July the 22nd, 2016. And did they make a big impression? Well, they did. But what was the question all the mainstream media asked? Why did the Russians do this? Why did the Russians do this? None of them asked, my God, Hillary stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. So just to wrap this segment up, if I may, you have the deep state personified by James Comey and CIA Director John Brennan. You have the Dems, of course. Hillary Clinton, we know from those documents, was indeed the intellectual author of Russiagate. You could see it in the documents, okay? And they're genuine. And then you had somebody murdered, okay? So you have the press covering that up and covering everything else. So it's a kind of a noxious mix between the deep state, the Dems, and the media. And when murder is involved, as I believe it is, and I'll say that right out, even though people say, oh, McGovern, you're a conspiracy theorist. No. Explain to me why the FBI swooped down and took Seth Rich's computers. Explain to me why I was subpoenaed for all the evidence I had that it wasn't the Russians that hacked in. It was somebody else. It was somebody who had access to DNC computers. Why was I subpoenaed by Seth Rich's brother and fancy lawyers to produce evidence that the Russians didn't hack? Well, I didn't need to do that anymore because the head of CrowdStrike, the cyber organization that the FBI hired to do this, came up with testimony on the 5th of December 2017 now that there was no hack of the Democratic National Committee for these emails, that it was a copy with a thumb drive you stick in there, and that was under oath by the head of CrowdStrike. But 95% of your audience probably doesn't know that, because the major media has concealed that since December 5th, 2017 to whatever it is today. It's too early in the morning for me to remember what it is today, but it's a long time, right? So people don't know that. So that's the challenge. That's why I'm delighted to be on your show, Jamal, because you get the word out, and people should tell other people. And if they think that McGovern is speaking through his hat, no. We have documentary evidence. That's what we worked with when I was an analyst at the CIA. And, it's bizarre to have to work with that now on domestic issues as they pertain to the Soviet Union or to Russia. And last thing I'll say is that the key, when people kept asking me for years, they said, McGovern, why don't you get that out of your head? Who cares? Who cares whether Russia's hacked or not? And what's the reason? And I'd finally said, well, I guess the reason is that Russia has nuclear weapons. And as I said, most people are brainwashed, including people very close to me. When I say Putin has done something correctly, I'm Putin's pocket here. It's crazy, and that's what we have to contend with. Sorry for taking so long here.
I'm glad you explained it. I mean, my audience knows about the thumb drive. At least I think they do. The majority will. But your breakdown of it is extremely good. And as you make the point, I don't think people get the gravity of the psyop that was committed and perpetrated on the American public. And when you get, Democrats like howler monkeys that effectively believe this stuff, like from stem to stern, then it affects policy. It's not like it dies in a vacuum. They have a certain point of view. Well, Putin got Trump elected. Trump is an ogre, and we hate Putin because he got Trump elected. Like, there's a line of thought that goes along with it that adversely affects the ability to get anything done, even if it's some kind of deal, which is what I want to pivot to, by the way.
Sure.
So this is Lavrov. Lavrov gave an interesting breakdown after he's been on this kind of press circuit. And he pointed out that the relationship between, I'm just going to play it out, and I'm going to get your take on a question after I play this. And this is this, and this.
Definitely, yes. It was abundantly clear that the esteemed head of the United States and his dedicated team, first and foremost, genuinely wanted to achieve a comprehensive and lasting result that would be long-term, inherently stable, and truly reliable, quite unlike the European counterparts, who at that particular time kept persistently insisting everywhere that only an immediate ceasefire was absolutely needed, and after that they would continue to relentlessly supply weapons to Ukraine.
All right. So just to be very clear, Lavrov is making this point of Donald Trump and his team at Alaska seemed like they were actually looking for a long-term deal as opposed to ceasefire, and that the Russians believed they were doing that in lieu of the Europeans and Zelensky, who just wanted a basic ceasefire so they can load Ukraine up full of weapons. All right. Fast forward. Then you get this. Trump puts out this tweet. And in this tweet, Trump says, it's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invaded country. It's like a great team sport, a team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but is not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning it. Is like that with Ukraine and Russia. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, this is a war that would have never happened if I were president. Zero chance. Now, the reality of it is Donald Trump tried to say, no, this wasn't a veiled attack, effectively saying Ukraine needs the capability to fight Russia. That's not really what I'm saying. However, he turns around and gives missiles, supposedly. I mean, I've read reports that said these missiles are not even ready yet, and they were purely experimental. But there were two sets of missile types that Trump is apparently sending to Ukraine, of course, paid for by the Europeans in the way that he keeps saying Europe is paying for it, Europe is paying for it. All right. So who is Trump lying to? Is Trump lying to the Europeans, or is Trump lying to the Russians? Because somebody is being misled in this. And I give me your take on that. And the reason why I'm saying it is Lavrov clearly has a certain perception. And maybe Lavrov is just playing up the politics. Fair enough. But Lavrov is coming out to saying, hey, Trump actually wants a real deal. Trump tells the Europeans, yeah, we're going to get security guarantees. And I'm going to give you backing, potentially. And I'm going to give you air cover, potentially, and intelligence, as long as you're willing to put your people into the teeth of the Russian meat grinder. Okay, who is he lying to? He obviously knows that Russia is never going to accept European troops on the ground, which is effectively just NATO on the ground in Ukraine. Give me your take on this.
Well, if anything, Trump is inconsistent. Okay, even in that one thing that you showed, the meat is in the last sentences. This is not my war. It's Biden's war. I'm going to get out of here. The vice president has said just 2 weeks ago, we're done with Ukraine. Forget about it. We're done. You Europeans, you want to help out and buy our weapons? Then be our guests. But we're done. We tried, and we supported Ukraine for as long as, wait a second, not for as long as it takes, for as long as it took. That's now. Okay. Now, you have this ridiculous spectacle where the U.S. is going to provide weapons to the Europeans, and the Europeans don't have any money to buy those weapons, and the U.S. doesn't have any weapons to sell because their production lines are way, way down. Okay, so no weapons to sell, no money to buy them, and then the Ukrainians have no soldiers to use them, for God's sake. So it's a perfect deal. What can go wrong? Now, the key is, I'm convinced, and I believe that Putin and Lavrov are also convinced, that Trump does want a deal. Now he's going to say contradictory things, and analysts are going to pour over these things. But look, if he wants a deal and Putin has some flexibility, which Lavrov has taken pains to point out, and at the summit, the result was, we have some flexibility, let's deal. Well, that gives me hope, well-based hope in my view, that they can work something out short of unconditional surrender by the West, NATO, the US, and Ukraine. That serves nobody's interest. We know what that means a couple of years, a couple of decades down the road, okay? So is there a makings of a deal? Of course there is. Now, what about Putin? Doesn't he want to take over all of Ukraine? No. Does he want to take Poland? Is Biden right when he says, you think Putin is going to stop in Ukraine? He's going to go on to Poland. He's going to take the Baltic states. Huh? Where do you get that? There's not a scintilla of evidence. Now, one thing that people can relate to, when Biden says Putin will never stop, well, guess what, folks? You may not know this, but he did stop. When Zelensky sent his best friend to negotiate a deal 2 days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they talked in Belarus, and then they talked in Istanbul. They did a deal, and the deal was no Ukraine and NATO, ceasefire, and we'll work out the other stuff later, okay? The US and the UK came in and said, no deal. No, you have to fight on here because we'll support you for as long as it takes if you turn down that deal. And they turned it down. The deal was there. The Russian forces around Kiev were withdrawn as a measure to show honesty here. So not only do the Russians not intend to take over all of Ukraine, and the reason for that, for those of you who don't know about Vietnam, is that would create for Putin and the Russians Vietnam. The people in Western Ukraine hate the Russians in a real way. The ones in the East, not so much. So that will create a Vietnam. So he's not going to. He wants a deal where he can stop with a cordon sanitaire, a buffer zone to protect the Russian forces. But he'll stop. Now, Is there any evidence that he wants to go on to Poland? No. He stopped. No. How about the Baltic state? So it's all rhetoric. But the problem is the media. And that's, again, why I'm so glad that you're working hard at this. If people buy this stuff and with not any evidence and with the media part of the military-industrial complex, you know, I mean, let's face it, the media is a kind of a small cost center of mega corporations that make 90% of their income from selling weapons and producing weapons and that kind of thing. So the media is a small cog in this wheel. They're not going to let anybody on that would say things that I say. They'll let people on like General Jack Keane and others and portray us, for God's sake, as if they have a good record for being right. Of course, they don't. But they have a really good record of saying what the military-industrial complex wants them to say.
Right. But Donald Trump has a nuclear option. Like part of his issue, Axios in Atlantic was pointing out that the Trump administration is getting fed up with the Europeans and Zelensky believing that they're doing everything possible to create undue demands, basically demands that they know can never be fulfilled, that the Russians would never accept in order to keep the war going. So if that's true, and if the Europeans who knows that daddy can walk, meaning they know that at the end of the day, Donald Trump can walk, they don't want that. And so they're very, very submissive to him, despite complaining in the background, we're not going to accept this and blah, blah, blah. But when they get to Trump, of course, it's daddy, you know, don't leave, but we beseech you to do X and Y and Z. Why doesn't Trump just walk? I mean, if Trump says, I'm pulling out the CIA, I'm pulling out Intel, I'm not giving you any more weapons, nor am I selling you any more weapons, this war is over, correct? And so if you believe that Trump wants to over with, wouldn't walking settle this issue?
Yes, in a word, yes. I believe the chances are he's going to walk. Now, do I make that up out of thin air? No. Every time he speaks on the issue, he says, "It's not my war; it's Biden's war." For God's sake, I want to stop people from being killed. And Putin and Lavrov say, you know, we think Trump is sincere. We trust him. Now, Jamal, after all the betrayals, all the ceasefires that were broken, all the European laughing about guaranteeing these ceasefires, and that they we only signed on that to supervise these ceasefires so that the Ukrainians could keep training and being weaponized to NATO standards, and they laugh about that. So after all those betrayals, for these guys to still say so look, I got a half century of experience looking at what Soviet and Russian leaders say. There got to be a reason that they say that. They're trying to tell the rest of the Russian people, look, we know what happened before. Putin has said explicitly, you know, I was naive dealing with these guys, trusting them before, but now he's talking about trust again. So here you have it. Those, I call it, that scene in the White House where those 7 Europeans were drawn up like school children in front of the teacher's desk there. I call that the Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, okay? And Snow White, I hate to compare Snow White to Trump or vice versa, but okay, you have the 7 Dwarfs there, right? Now, in the middle of that meeting where he was telling them what's going to happen on Ukraine and explaining what happened in Alaska, I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm calling Mr. Putin right now. We arranged that I was going to call, so could you leave the room for a while? You know, so-and-so will reach out there. Could you just show it in the next room, okay? And he's there for half an hour talking to Putin on the phone. And then he says, let him back in, let him back in. Okay, and they sit down there dutifully. Now, do they have the wherewithal to help Ukraine? No, they don't, okay? And why? Well, you talked about Big Daddy. Now, your listeners or your viewers probably know that comes from the Secretary General of the NATO. His name is Mark Rutte. He's Dutch, right? And the last NATO summit, he says before holy cameras, "Oh, Daddy's here! Welcome, Daddy." When Trump comes in, see now. here's my message to Americans. Daddy is a deadbeat. Now, we know what a deadbeat is, right? Okay. Daddy ain't going to pay any alimony, and he's not going to pay any child support for those 7 children. Okay. I mean, it's clear as a bell. The vice president has said it explicitly. We're done with supporting, financially supporting you. So where are the Europeans going to get the money? Or where are they going to get the arms? Well, I've already said there aren't any arms to sell, and there's not any money to buy them, and there's not enough people in Ukraine to demand them. I mean, the whole thing is months away. Now, the craziness is that people like the British have such a big stake in this that I fully expect they're considering a false flag attack blamed on the Russians so that we can get into what they might consider just a little war in Europe. My God, that's crazy. But I think the chances of that happening may be less than even, but we ought to be alert for it because we shouldn't let ourselves be led by the nose by the British anymore.
Right.
That's been too often the case, and it's led to disaster.
So just to be clear, you think Trump is ultimately going to walk. Why hasn't he done so already if that's the case?
Well, because of Rubio, because of Kellogg, he had to appoint, or he felt he had to appoint, neocons in major positions. Now, he deals with the Russians through Witkoff, who, right, about 10 times as intelligent as, well, that's damning with faint praise, but he's 10 times intelligent as Rubio or Kellogg. I'm just very, very clear. So, yeah, he's got Lindsey Graham, for God's sake, who wants bone crunching sanctions, and they're delirious. They're delusional because they've already got all the sanctions that they want, that they could have on Russia. Russia has found really a good way to deal with them. The only positive GNP in the whole of Europe is Russians. It's been over 4%, it'll be 2% next year, and the rest of the people are in recession. So, right, people have to be realistic here and say, well, it looks like the handwriting's on the wall. What could Zelensky? Zelensky is a real protege of the British. They've been writing his speeches. They've been doing lots of stuff there in coordination with the CIA, but not always, okay? So, if Trump tells the CIA, look, knock it off, I don't give them any more intelligence, and the weapons can't come because there are no weapons, well, a couple months down the road, it's going to be some sort of deal made between Putin and Trump. Let's hope both of them survive long enough to make that deal. I have real questions as to what would happen if Trump were done away with, as they tried to do twice already, or if Putin had some sort of fatality. That's always possible. And my God, I think I'll say this outright. I think we're very fortunate in having a person so measured, so perspicacious,
yes,
so careful about not provoking the West as Putin has been. I think we have to give him credit for that, as well as dragging Russia out of abject poverty,
agreed,
out of being exploited by the Wall Street guys and the Treasury guys there when the Soviet Union fell apart, building up their army to make it the most powerful army in the world, really. In some respects, dwarfing our capabilities, like with hypersonic missiles. In other words, I've been around a while. This is the first time, I think, that the Russians outmatch us in weaponry, except for strategic, ICBMs. There we still have sort of parity. But in conventional forces, in hypersonic missiles, which do not have to carry a nuclear head, but can, okay, it's no match anymore. Another thing I'd like to adduce here, to give some perspective. I'm an old guy, and I studied graduate school when George Kennan was a big guy. George Kennan was the ambassador to Moscow. He crafted the containment policy where we're going to stop the Russians from taking over the rest of Europe way back in the day, right? That was after World War II. 1948. he wrote a memorandum. It was the first policy memorandum written by the State Department policy people. He was the first chairman. I printed it out because I thought it might give some context. It's very brief. It's just one paragraph. Here it is. And bear in mind what the situation is now in China, with all those people congregating not only for the Shanghai Cooperation Council, but also for the 80th anniversary of victory in the Far East. Okay, here's George Kennan, 1948, policy set, first policy paper. Quote, we, the United States, have about 50% of the world's wealth, but we only have 6.3% of its population. Now, our real task in the coming period is to devise a pattern of relationships which will permit us to maintain this disparity. To do so, we will have to dispense with all sentimentality and daydreaming, and our attention has to be concentrated everywhere on our immediate national objectives. We shall cease to talk about vague and unreal objectives such as human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization. The day is not far off when we are going to have to deal in straight power concepts, period, end quote. Okay, so that set the post-war policy. We emerged pretty much unscathed. Europe was destroyed. We had 50% of the world's wealth, but only 6.3% of its population. What's the percentage now? Oh, wow. We have 4% of the world's population, okay? And as to control of the world's resources, well, look at those people. Look at those people convening in China now.
Yep.
They dispose of 43% of the world's population, China, India, and the others, okay? And they have they have most of the world's wealth as well. So this was right after World War II. You could understand it, although, you know, it just disappointed me that Kennan didn't give a rat's patootie about human rights, or what else did he call sentimentality, or what is it? So we have to, daydreaming. Straight power concepts. Okay, now what needs to happen is people realize we are no longer the hegemon. Okay, now try as we may, it's not one against one. Russia and the United States, Soviet Union, United States. I used to say 2 against 1, China and Russia, but now it's 3 against 1. We have so alienated India.
Yeah,
a smidgen more population than China, like whatever it is, you know.
5 billion.
Yeah, so we alienated all those folks gratuitously, you know. 50% tariffs on India. For what, you know? So anyhow, this group that is starting today, well, yesterday, I guess, in Chinese time, in Shanghai, will be represented at the big march, the big victory thing on the 2nd or 3rd of October, depending on which time. And that's going to be so big. Yeah, it's the 3rd, but it'll be the 2nd in me. It's the 3rd.
Oh, right. Time zone. I'm sorry.
That's the this was a victory over Japan. Japan is not sending anyone, by the way. They feel it's not nice to talk about victory over the Japanese. The Japanese occupied China, Manchuria especially,
Korea,
since 1931. Okay, how many Chinese were lost in World War II?
It's like 30 million
people. Yeah, right. And we know that the Russians lost 27 million. These are people. Now, how much did we lose? Well, last count, 420,000. Okay, And they were all service people, of course, all the servicemen and women. So do the math, for God's sake. These people know what war is like. And the Japanese still have their noses at a joint. Why do you celebrate defeating us? Well, if I were out there, I would be, I grew up, we were prejudiced against the Japs, as we call them, and I regret, all the racism involved. But they certainly give us a lot of cause as immature youths to be talking about the Japs, all the films and everything. So they were that way, and it took a lot of American Marines to rebuff them. The only regret that I have really is that there was no need to drop those atomic bombs. Everybody knows that who tunes into your program. It was not only to keep Russia out or warn Russia of our capability, it was also pure and simple racism. Now, why do I say that? Well, Truman never referred to African Americans by any other word than the N word, okay? Mm-hmm. And he had a Secretary of State named, his name was Jimmy Burns. He was from South Carolina, okay? And he was equally prejudiced. So when MacArthur, when Eisenhower, when Admiral Halsey all came to President Truman and said, don't do it, for God's sake, don't drop that bomb. Well, do a demonstration out in the Pacific, but don't kill tens of thousands of people. Truman said, that's all right. We can do it. And he relied on his Secretary of State, Jimmy Burns, and he went and did it. Now, my point is that the reason Truman and Burns could take this so cavalierly was, pure and simple racism. Now, I have nothing against the great state of South Carolina, but there was a general who ran our war in Vietnam. His name was Westmoreland, and he was from the great state of South Carolina. And he used to call those folks gooks and, whatever, okay. And, there's Lindsey Graham. He's a senator from the great state of South Carolina. So there must be something in the water down there. I don't know. I don't want to accuse anybody of being racist, but if they're not racist, there's something else wrong. So what I'm saying here is that there are a lot of factors here that Americans don't really appreciate because the history books don't have them. I check with my grandchildren, okay? This is interesting. The three that live in Oakland, they knew that it was not necessary to drop the atomic bomb. We had the codes broken. We knew that all we had to say to the Japanese, look, we won't hang up your emperor on a street lamp, okay? You could keep your damn emperor. Just stop the war. And it would have stopped like that. We knew that. But Truman, no, he wanted to demonstrate this bomb. And if those people didn't look like us, well, it didn't matter so much, did it? We see that having to do with the Palestinians as well. It's kind of sort of like our cardinal sin here. We know what we did to the Native Americans, and we know what we did to the people that were enslaved and brought from Africa. We know all that, but we don't really have that in our history. Anyhow, what I was going to say, the three from Oakland knew that. The ones from Virginia, the ones from North Carolina, the ones from where else? From Massachusetts. No, they had the old history book. They knew that we had to drop those bombs to save hundreds of thousands of American lives, because when we invaded Japan, then they would fight and kill 100,000 more Marines. That was BS, and we have lots of BS still going on. The history thing is a big thing for me. I know a lot about the last 86 years of history. Yeah, because I was born 1 week before World War II. Okay, yeah. So I've been around, and I know a lot of that history, and I've learned along the way about history before that. I didn't learn much from my history book. Now I know which ones to consult and which ones to remind me of what really happened. So, I appeal to your viewership to make sure you know the people's history of the United States, yes, and what Oliver Stone has written and all that kind of stuff. because that way people can understand what's going on now and why the Russians, why after the war was won, or even before the war was won in 1945, Winston Churchill was advising Franklin Delano Roosevelt, hey, now we have to go against the Russians. Now we have this atom bomb. Now we finish off the Russians. Our ally.
Also, by the way. MacArthur
What's
also.
that?
MacArthur also was
Oh,
like, we can take the Russians down while we have the chance. Yeah, they were thinking.
Yeah, and they tried that out in the Far East. So that's the hegemon's attitude. What I'm saying now is it's nowhere near what it was like after the war. And these people, to their credit, are not ganging up on us. The Chinese are saying to us, look, how about leaving us alone? I mean, how about a win-win? That's what we Chinese are used to. And by the way, that we haven't invaded another country in a long time, but if you invade us, that's the end of you. And we have people talking about defending Taiwan, the country of Taiwan. Well, 55 years or so ago, or longer, it was 1972, we recognize there's just one China, and Taiwan is a part of China. So if the Chinese invade Taiwan, well, listen, folks, they're not going to do that because it's inevitable. No matter how many missiles we put in Taiwan, it's going to be eventually joined to the Chinese mainland. And so the Chinese are not going to start a war there. Whether we start a war with our battleships and aircraft carriers and all that kind of stuff, that's another matter. But the Chinese have the ascendancy there. The only reason that China is the main enemy now is because we need to build more ships, more jet aircraft, more, because China is a big threat. Biden, 2 months into his office, China aspires to be not only the economic hegemon, but the military hegemon, and that's not going to happen on my watch. Okay, so he's reading from George Kennan.
Yep.
But wake up, Biden. You're a cold warrior, but there's no more percentage in this kind of bipolar existence. It's multipolar now. And my first account at the CIA, my first analysis portfolio was relations between the Soviets and the Chinese. Okay. Now, in those days, they were shooting at each other across the border. China was claiming, with some good fundamental reason, 1.5 million square kilometers of Siberia. Okay, there were conflicting in all the Communist Party and everything else. So I was telling people, look, they hate each other, and I was telling people, like everybody else, they probably always hate each other, but maybe if more enlightened Chinese and Russians come in, they'll see how stupid it is to sacrifice, and that happened finally. And now we have them in an alliance where they don't call it a military alliance. But you bet, this is not going to happen, but you bet that if the Russians started to lose in Ukraine, you could expect some real dust-ups in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits. And then where would we be? We don't have enough troops to put into Europe, much less into Asia. So there's a lot of megalomania here and delusionary thinking. And of course, Trump is susceptible to that, and that's a problem because as the Russians look on Trump, they say, well, he's mercurial, he changes his mind all the time, and he doesn't know anything about war. He had a bone spur. He had deferments, and none of his family ever served. So we have to be really careful with this guy. We have to cajole him, but we have to also convince him that if he's ready for a deal, if he wants us to help him, we Russians, by buying and applying enough lipstick to this pig of defeat in Ukraine, we'll do that. Sure. For a deal, we'll do that. We get a buffer zone there. We get our core interests respected, and we'll have a new European security arrangement. And you should like that too, Mr. Trump. Oh, yeah, I think I like that too. Yeah. And it isn't my war after, and I want to stop killing a lot of Ukrainians and Russians too.
I got to be honest. I don't think he cares about the last part. I do think he
I'm
cares
sorry?
about. I don't think he cares about the last part. I don't think Trump cares about Ukrainians dying.
No, but the rhetoric is effective. I mean,
yeah,
look,
exactly,
you know, I mean,
exactly.
Now it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, my God, we haven't talked about Gaza. That is so heinous. If I ever thought that I would be part of a democracy, the head of which was not only condoning, but arming, supplying, financing genocide and forced starvation by Israel.
Yeah, it's breathtaking.
I would say, no, this will never happen in my country, but that's it. Okay. And then, Jamal, you know, if you try to piece together why Trump seems to be a tool in Netanyahu's hand, I would like to speculate that there's another reason, and it's called blackmail.
You think so?
I do think so. Yeah, I can't prove it, but look at this Epstein thing. Huh? Look at it. It's very, very curious how all this stuff is going down, and we have a Mossad, an ex-Mossad, that's the Israeli intelligence service, like the CIA. We have one of those guys saying to prominent interviewers, yeah, you know, if Trump would only come clean, if he'd only say, okay, release all those things, it's going to be terrible for me, very embarrassing, but it would stop the genocide. Well, please do that, Mr. Trump. Please do that. His name is Ben Menashe, is his name. And he's been a source of very, very important scholars and reporters, one of which was Robert Parry, the late Robert Parry, who tutored me on how to be a journalist rather than an intelligence officer, and found Ben Menashe a very lucrative source on the October surprise, you know, the one where the Iranians were persuaded by the likes of Bill Casey, head of the CIA later, not to release those hostages until Reagan was sworn in on, you know, so, I mean, so he's an experienced source. For him to say that sort of thing, it almost comes to tears. He said, you know, this is a moral thing, for God's sake. Mr. Trump, please just out with it. Then you'll be hurt, but you'll feel a lot better for it, and you'll stop the killing. My God, look at it. The interviewer is a fellow named, let's see.
I'm going to look him up.
I'll think of it. Yeah, I'll think of it in a second. It's going around now. Yeah. Oh, Atanzi. Yeah. Atanzi, I think it is. Attansi.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah.
I've interviewed him. Yeah, I know him.
He's very good. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm going to look that up. I'm going to check that out. I mean, between a person being injured versus genocide, I think the individual, especially somebody like Trump with his level of hubris and mendacity and ego, I think he is probably going to just continue all of these people getting killed and starved. I feel you, though. It's horrendous. It has been a learning experience for me. Maybe one that's far darker than I would have wanted, but it's real. It's honest. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody got involved. We've watched this on our screens, on our social media. We've watched people just get taken apart. And we backed it.
When I was a kid, as I say, you know, I was born just before the war, but when I was an adolescent, I learned about all this stuff. And I remember thinking, you know, 12-year-old, my God, genocide, killing 6 million Jews. When I get big, I'm going to do everything I can to stop that from happening again when I get big. Well, I'm big. And on every program that I'm interviewed on, or every speech that I make, or everything I write, I always start with the genocide in Gaza. My God, that's heinous. And if it has to do with blackmail, it's heinous squared, for God's sake, you know?
Yeah.
And are we powerless? No, I can't believe we're powerless to do it. We don't have to be obedient Germans. We need to take action, get off our sofas and go to our congressional representatives and say, look, you've got to stop this thing. Look what's happening. You've seen the pictures. This time we have the pictures, right? So that should be enough for an uprising of some kind where we can say to our leaders, look, knock it off. I'll just mention this thing. Technology also often is the key to revolution, okay? Now, I'll just say, well, telegraph was one, but here's one more recent one. When Ayatollah Khomeini was in Paris, okay? And there was lots of unrest in Iran because of the dictator they had there who was really bad, the Shah, okay? So Khomeini had this new technology. It was, try to explain it to stay, there were two reels here and a tape, it was called a tape recorder. And then they put it down into cassette. And he would make these fiery speeches. And the cassettes would get to every minaret in Iran, and they'd be blasted from the top of the minaret. Okay, well, cause of resolution. Okay, now we all have these. What are they? These things. What we call cycle. And even though they kill, even though the Israelis murder journalists, 200 of them now, 200. Okay. Well, enough of these people with these kinds of phones here that are recording what's going on. If you want to see some of the emaciated children, some of the people who are being starved to death, all you have to do is be interested enough to look at those things. So the evidence is there in a way that it's never been before because of the new technology. For God's sake, let's get up, Americans. Let's stop it, because if we can't stop this, then we're really not a democracy. Our forefathers would be shamed by our behavior in becoming bystanders instead of active in opposing evil.
Ray McGovern, American political activist, former Central Intelligence Agency officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990. In the 1980s, chaired the National Intelligence Estimate and participated in preparing the president's daily briefs. Ray, I have watched you for years. I thank you for this. I really do.
Thank you, Jamal.
Deeply appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye. Ray McGovern, had the opportunity to have him on. I've wanted him on the show for a while, so I thank him for joining me. I'm deeply appreciative of him coming on. And look, his point is real, and it's a hard point. Like, I have to be honest with you, it's been a hard pill for me to swallow. I never thought that we, as a society, as a world, would just sit by and watch day in, day out, emaciated kids walking like ghosts, skeletons. And for it to go on for years, that is a hard pill for me to swallow. And yet, it's there every day. You can watch it. You see it on social media, volumes of it, just oceans of blood that the Israelis are effectively inflicting on the Palestinian population, with the United States firmly entrenched and backing them in doing so. Just outright murder. So he's right. It's a difficult thing and a humiliating thing and shameful thing for this country to be putting our tax dollars into it. We've come to the end. We've had a damn good show today. Let's go to the chat real quick before we close. Angry Dad, happy birthday, Jamal. Well, thank you, Angry Dad. I appreciate that. Just to be clear, the birthday was yesterday. This is my first day at the ripe old age of 48. Nearly half a century. That's a weird thing to wake up. Be like, holy shit, I'm nearly half a century old. So yeah, there's that. Fortunately, I don't entirely look it. So I guess there's all sorts of perks associated with it. But it is here. Great listener. You're about man. What? Glad you're about man. I don't know what that means. Happy birthday yesterday. Thank you for that, Sheree. Much appreciated, Sheree. Thank you all for the birthday wishes. It is a sick society, Chris Fisher. It is very sick society in so many different ways. There will be a reckoning. Hope you had a good birthday yesterday. But Patrick, kind of yes and no. I had issues with the Airbnb, but they settled the issue in my favor. I got everything that I wanted. It worked out exactly the way I wanted. Yeah, good day. Hated having to move, but all things being equal, better place, better internet. Got my money back. So yeah. How did the birthday go from being? What was it? It's all starts going down when you're 50. Enjoy your next 2 years. Oh man, if you only knew the complications of life that I have endured. It does. It's not a shocking phenomenon. It's not like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm dying. Everything does. Every day that passes, every minute of a clock tick is 1 minute closer to your head hitting the floor and your heart stopping. It's just life. Expect life is not easy. Mr. Pink, yes and no. I mean, easy, no. It's complicated. But it's like anything else. You trade one thing for the other. I feel like a better person when I'm traveling. I tend to be healthier when I'm traveling. I'm more plugged into life. When I was back in the States, I felt like I was dying. I really did. When I was married, I felt like I was dying. I think I don't think it was my wife's fault in that sense. It was just, I don't know. You get a routine, and the routine just eats you alive. So I don't know. But Jamal was born on the first day of actual Christmas. August 31st is the first day of our Christmas. That's news to me. That's news to me. All right, though, I'm going to close this. I'm dragging ass. I want to thank all of you for joining me. We had a damn good show today. We got up to nearly 1,000. I want to thank all of my guests. They are fantastic. I should be here until October. So I'm going to be here for a while. But you guys be safe. Darth, get some sleep. I can't get some sleep, Darth. I have to work after I close this stream. I have to cut the videos. All right. But you guys have a fantastic day or rest of your day, depending upon where you are. Jinho Choi, I know you're in Australia, so you're 2 hours ahead. So you're like at 11 o'clock. But you have a good day, man. Thanks, Charles. I appreciate that. And thank you, Wandy. I appreciate that too. You guys be safe and have a good one. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode, what is this? 226. We've been in fellowship 226 times. Think about that. Signing off. Be safe and be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one, all.